Mild start to Saturday. Again, most places cloudy. The wind's a little lighter on Saturday. That could make for some foggy conditions in places. Could be quite a murky old day on Saturday. If that mist and fog doesn't clear, well, temperatures may only be in the mid-teens, but with a bit of brightness, say North Wales, we could get up to the high teens in places. As for Sunday, well, again, most places dry. Could be quite misty and murky. And again, very, very mild. Bye for now.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Welcome everybody, you're with Patrick Christys on GB News. Nurses strikes, train strikes, civil servants striking. It's strike Armageddon. Is this just greedy unions attempting to overthrow a government in some kind of conservative effort? And could we start putting illegal migrants on cruise ships? It'll bring a whole new meaning, won't it, to the Club 18 to 30 boat trips. Britain's most lucrative speed camera, that's what we're going to be talking about. And the World Cup. It's coming home. Anyway, are we facing a rebellion from workers not seen since the general strike of the 1980s? As we come on air yesterday, it was announced that they will walk out, this is nurses of course, in a dispute over pay. Today, civil servants say they'll walk out over pensions and jobs. And within the last few hours, news of more. Yes, more rail strikes. There's talk of paramedics striking. How long before it's teachers as well? We're staring down the barrel of these general strikes, aren't we? When will it end, and will striking workers ever win? With businesses and governments giving in to their demand, will it bring down the government? But forget the booze cruise. Soon it's going to be a migrant holiday. Club 18 to 30, I'm calling it. Migrants on tour, P&O migrants, whatever, it writes itself. Anyway, the Home Office is reported to be considering housing migrants on disused cruise ships to cut the costs of putting them in hotels. And we now know who's on the plane to represent England in the controversial World Cup in Qatar. James Maddison, Callum Wilson, they've been picked by manager Gareth Southgate. We now know who will represent us and other home nations, but there's still a huge cloud over the tournament, isn't there? The human rights record is pretty diabolical over there. Is it too late for fans to boycott it? I think it should be more about advertisers. They're a little bit hypocritical. I think they should biff the World Cup, in my opinion. Have your say. gbviews at gbnews.uk. Would you rather have migrants on ships than in hotels? Are you afraid of a general strike? And when we come back from the news, hopefully I'll remember how to talk properly.
Good afternoon, it's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom, and we start with the strikes. Train drivers at 12 operators are to strike on the 26th of November. Members of ASLEF are involved in a long-running dispute over pay. They're among several rail unions on strike this month, including the RMT and Unite. Meanwhile, a tube strike's causing disruption across London today with limited services on the Underground. Passengers are urged to check before they travel, with problems expected to continue into tomorrow morning. Well, that, as the Health Secretary says, he's had a constructive meeting with the Royal College of Nursing. The union's been urging the government to take action over pay or face disruption across the country. Steve Barclay says they've agreed to meet again soon in order to avoid industrial action. The government says the union's asking for a 17.6% pay boost. Meanwhile, 100,000 civil servants have voted for a national strike over pay, pensions and jobs. The Public and Commercial Services Union says the move means industrial action will take place across a range of services. Workers affected include driving test examiners, border force officials and job centre staff. Downing Street says the Prime Minister has spoken to Ukraine's president, reiterating the UK's unwavering support for the country. Rishi Sunak this morning reassured Volodymyr Zelensky that the UK would continue to provide military aid, including more than 25,000 extreme weather kits for troops. It follows Russia's withdrawal yesterday from the strategic southern city of Kherson. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak is this afternoon meeting leaders of the devolved nations and the Irish Premier for the first time since becoming Prime Minister. He's expected to urge the nations to work together and build a future defined not by division, but by unity. Mr Sunak's at the British-Irish Council Summit in Blackpool, where he's meeting his Irish counterpart Michael Martin and First Ministers Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford. The absence of a power-sharing executive means Northern Ireland won't be represented by any politicians at the talks. Peter Carl, Shadow Secretary for Northern Ireland, says change is needed.
There's got to be a change of attitude. There's got to be more emphasis on Northern Ireland, and the interests of Northern Ireland have got to be put first, not as it has been for years now, neglected and used as a tool to beat a political tool to beat the EU with or other issues.
A man from Somerset has been sentenced to life for murdering his partner, who died 21 years after he set her on fire. 58-year-old Stephen Craig left Jacqueline Kirk severely disfigured after the attack in Weston-super-Mare back in 1998. Craig had already served 15 years in prison, but was arrested again last year after Jacqueline died from her injuries in 2019. His sentence carries a minimum of 15 years. The Queen Consort has commemorated victims of the nation's wars at a ceremony at Westminster Abbey. Camilla laid a cross in the field of remembrance in memory of those who died in past conflicts, with a 2-minute silence observed this morning. More than 1,000 veterans gathered in the grounds of the Abbey. And England manager Gareth Southgate has named his 26-man squad for the World Cup in Qatar, which kicks off in just over a week. The FA made the announcement on the England Twitter feed earlier. Leicester midfielder James Maddison has been included, as have Manchester United forward Marcus Rashford, Newcastle striker Callum Wilson and Manchester City defender Kyle Walker, despite recent injury problems. Well, speaking to the press earlier, Southgate said having a bigger squad has its benefits.
So having 26 available meant that we were probably able to take a couple of risks that you might not have been able to with 23. But we think the balance is there, and we've got cover in the positions we need. We're lighter on depth in some positions than other in our country, but we think we've got everything covered.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's over to you, Patrick.
Hello and welcome. This is Patrick Christys on GB News. I'll be with you all the way through until 6 p.m. Before we get stuck into Strike Armageddon, clearly the big one that's going to pop off in the inbox today, GBviews at gbnews.uk, is this announcement that we might be about to put some asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, on cruise ships or up at Butlins or Pontins. Get that. What do you make of that? GBViews at gbnews.uk. But first, strike Armageddon. This afternoon, 100,000 civil servants have voted to go on strike in a dispute over pay and pensions. And within the last few hours, train drivers, classic, also announced that they will walk out at the end of this month, although it's hard to tell sometimes, depending on which train that you get. The news comes less than 24 hours after nurses said they'd walk out by the end of the year as strike action threatens to cripple our public services. Well, this afternoon, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, met with the Royal College of Nursing General Secretary, Pat Cullen, and he tweeted, "Constructive meeting with the RCN, covering a number of topics. Nurses do an incredible job, and I regret some union members have voted for strikes. My priority is to keep patients safe and minimise disruption. My door is open, and we have agreed to meet again shortly." But are we now staring down the barrel of a general strike like those that we had decades ago? I can't help but wonder if this is some kind of concerted attempt to try to bring down the government. Is this what we're seeing now, unions weaponising themselves? Worth noting as well, a little bit of a conversation for you at home or wherever you are listening or watching is, OK, right, 17.6% pay rise for nurses, bit rum, if you ask me. But is there a happy medium there somewhere? Would you be willing to give them some pay rise if it meant that we didn't have the NHS shutting down? Because there's also rumours of things like a paramedic walkout, etc. Not too far off our NHS just shutting over Christmas. Anyway, to shed some more light on this, I am joined now by former Senior Assistant General Secretary at the RMT Union, Steve Hadley. Steve, thank you very, very much. Why are these people so content on bringing utter misery to people?
Well, who are you talking about, the Tory government or Liz Truss has just got rid of?
Yes, very quick, very quick. Now, of course, look, one of the concerns that I would have with, frankly, all of this, look, whether or not it's nurses, etc., I understand that you've obviously got a history with the RMT, is that it affects the working class more than everybody else. And that's a big issue for you, isn't it? How do you expect to bring working class people on your side when it's them that you're crippling?
Well, I think you've got to look at it in the context of what's happened over the last decade. Public sector pay, the NHS has been suppressed, and people are now 25% worse off than they were a decade ago. Now, what this has meant that there's hundreds of thousands of vacancies in the NHS because people just literally can't make ends meet. And we have people leaving in droves, and those left behind are having to pick up the extra work, are getting more stressed. And of course, this is all deliberate. What we're having here is a government that are underinvested in the NHS. And the idea is that people will say, well, anything is better than this. And then they're friends with private companies like Virgin, like the other ICS, the other companies out there that are already providing medical services to the NHS will come up and take over a greater percentage of that market. So I think it's a deliberate underinvestment. They're driving people out.
I get what you mean. And the rumblings of a privatised NHS or a push towards privatisation have been in the pipeline almost since day dot. One of the areas where I think that falls down a little bit for me is that even a privatised NHS would be looking presumably to employ trained medical staff, you'd hope so anyway, and that they actually could end up paying the existing medical staff more money to work in the private sector, possibly. Can I just ask one question that I'm keen to get the handle on? So when people vote to go on strike, so let's just take what you know, so like the RMT. When your workers go on strike, does the RMT subsidise their salaries in any way?
No, they certainly don't subsidise their salaries. What there is usually is a hardship fund. So if somebody was suffering particular hardship, then they could apply for a payment from the union. So I don't know, they would produce a gas bill or an electric bill.
They get a bit. Because my wondering now, with the cost of living crisis and the fact that we keep hearing about how hard up a lot of people are, whether it's working on the railways or nurses, etc., is actually how long they could last on strike. So if the government just waited a few weeks and saw out the strikes, they'd all have to get back to work anyway, wouldn't they?
Well, the problem is this. I mean, if that happens, you're not going to solve anything. You're still going to have people leaving the NHS in droves, and you're still going to have people leaving public sector jobs in droves. And there has to be a solution which encompasses bringing those people up to a living where they can actually survive and stay in that job. I mean, a lot of people want to stay in a job. They've been with the NHS for very, very good reasons. They want to provide a public service. But ultimately, if it's affecting their own life so badly that they have to, in a lot of cases, use food banks, then they're not going to stay in the job. You know, we hear a lot about the market deciding. Well, the market has decided that people no longer are able to make a living in the NHS and are leaving.
Yeah, how do you feel about one of the core issues, which is the moral issue, I suppose, of if people don't go to work, then there's a knock-on effect on everybody else. In a nurse's case, that knock-on effect might be death. And I think that elevates it somewhat, doesn't it? And, look, a lot of people are incredibly concerned whether you've got... Well, you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
Well, I'm laughing because I see it's the only time that the Tory party suddenly become concerned with working class people's health. I mean, there's no concern about it.
Health is everybody's health.
There's no concern about it when there's hundreds of thousands of vacancies in the NHS because it's been run into the ground. And anyway, I mean, look, it's a straw man. The emergency cover will be provided. The nurses have said that they're going to provide emergency cover. And I understand that people will be inconvenienced. People will have...
It's not... Yeah, all right. Look, it's not quite true. I mean, sorry, I was quite taken aback to see you laughing there at the idea that people might die this winter as a result of the nurses' strike.
I'm not laughing at that at all. I'm laughing at the absolute hypocrisy of people in the Tory government who have underfunded the NHS for years, who have killed thousands and thousands of disabled people by cutting benefits and cutting services, suddenly pretending that they're concerned with people's health.
Well, my focus on it was more to do with how do the nurses sleep at night if somebody does die, or the knock-on effect of it, because I get what you're saying about the emergency cover.
How do people like you sleep at night when you're coming out and parroting propaganda, which is actually... You are, of course you are.
Hang on a second.
You're trying to opinion form. You're more or less accusing the nurses of being murderers.
I'm trying to...
Disgrace.
OK, so it's an odd form of propaganda to invite somebody on who was a former assistant director or whatever you were, general secretary of a union to have a discussion. I mean, it's an odd form of propaganda, isn't it? It's hardly Russian state TV, mate, is it? Let's be perfectly honest with you. I mean, you want to see propaganda, go and work in North Korea, although maybe that's more aligned with your politics. I don't know. But when it comes to nurses...
Well, I don't know. Well, I mean, to be quite honest...
No.
Your politics lead. The markets decide who's in government. The markets decide that Liz Truss isn't fit to be Prime Minister. That's your democracy, isn't it? If that happened in North Korea, you'd be out highlighting it. Nothing said in this country.
I'm not quite sure who you think I am or what influence you think I have on the government or anything like that, really, but I think it might be a little bit misled.
I just heard your tirade about picking on the most vulnerable in society, about nurses. Making out basically that they're killing people when they're doing the exact opposite.
I'm asking
the health service. They're protecting the health service.
I'm here trying to have a discussion with you about it. I mean, if you want to decide that you're hearing something completely different than what I am saying, which is I was about to ask before you started laughing at me, was a pretty straightforward question, really, which is that if people who can't get things like chemotherapy or dialysis, they might not obviously die straight away, but it will affect their care. That, one would assume, would play on the minds of the people striking, wouldn't it? Or do you just not think that's all?
Absolutely, I think they would, and they've taken a calculated decision and far better informed than me and you would take of that decision, that those people are far more likely at the minute, due to the vacancies in the NHS, due to the inability of the NHS because of the very poor wages they're paying, the more people will actually suffer if the nurses don't go on strike in the short term and actually take that decision and highlight the problem. Because public opinion...
What are nurses paid?
Sorry?
What are nurses paid?
Well, I think they start off on about £24,000 a year.
That's
the qualified nurses. And in London, that's nothing. In London, that's nothing. I mean, this is absolutely disgraceful.
I've got here a graph which has been produced, which is official figures, right? So an average nurse inside London, according to this graph, when you include annual sick leave, is just under 60,000 quid. And when you look at an average nurse outside London, obviously there's a big difference between the cost of living in London and outside London. It's about £50,000 as well.
So is pension pay, is annual leave, is national insurance contributions, are they all included in your calculation?
Basic pay, annual accrued pension, additional sick leave value. I mean, a lot of people would, and also for unsocial hours as well.
So basically, they're getting paid nowhere near that figure. What that figure is made up of is a lot of money that the employer and the employee have to pay in the national insurance. They have to pay in tax. What their pensions comes to, a value that may well change during retirement. So that's a notional figure, and that's not what people are paid at all. People are paid a lot less. Okay. So people are paid a lot less. And there's no dispute that over the past decade, their wages have gone down by over 20%, between 20 and 25%.
There is the dispute. Right, yes. Just a point of correction on this. I get what you're saying. You're talking about in real terms, OK? Because, of course, the actual number that they're being paid is not gone down.
Yeah.
Right. Just quickly, and finally, very finally...
If inflation's 10% and you're offered a 4% pay rise, then you get a 6% real terms pay cut. That's
I
reality.
get that, yes. A lot of people in the private sector will be shouting now, going, well, hang on a minute, I don't get a pay rise in line with inflation. Yes, but I do take your point. Very quickly and very lastly, I think slightly dispelling the myth, by the way, can I just say that I am some kind of propaganda Russia-style TV host, because I've been told to move on for a little while, but I am actually enjoying this discussion so much, I'm going to keep you on for another minute, very quickly, OK, which is, if the Labour Party come to power, which is, let's be honest, if you look at the polls right now, looking likely, would you still be striking under Labour? Do you think the unions have much more sway with the Labour Party than they do with the Tory Party? Because people are worried about that. If Labour come in, they'll be in the union's back pocket.
I think that the Labour Party at the minute's indistinguishable from the Tory Party in a lot of respects. I would hope that they would employ a more sensible approach to specifically the NHS and public service workers. But all workers in general need a pay rise. I really hope that they would, but I don't think there's any guarantee. I think Stammer is a light blue Tory.
OK, good stuff. All right, thank you very much. I actually quite enjoyed that. Senior Assistant General Secretary at the RMT, Steve Hadley, great stuff. All right, OK, what do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Are we hurtling towards a general strike? I am tempted to now deliver the rest of the show in Russian, but there we go. A cost-cutting exercise could be on the cards from the Home Office in the form of a cruise with a difference. It makes it sound like telesales, doesn't it? I've gone from being a Russian TV host propagandist to telesales for migrant cruises. Reports today said that the Home Secretary is considering housing migrants on disused cruise ships to tackle the huge cost of using hotels, currently costing the taxpayer around £7 million a day. Cruises have been used before to house refugees from Ukraine and Afghanistan, so it's got a bit of precedent, but should they be re-established to tackle the illegal Channel crossings? Joining me now is the former Chief Immigration Officer for UK Border Force, Kevin Saunders. He's been calling for offshore processing for some time. I mean, the jokes about Club 18 to 30 cruises write themselves, but what do you make about the actual practicalities of housing illegal immigrants, asylum seekers on cruise ships?
Well, yeah, you can do it. I mean, they're doing it in Scotland, aren't they? They're housing Ukrainians on cruise liners. The cruise liners are tied up at the quay, and they're just using them as floating hotels, basically. So I'm not sure that this is the most wonderful idea in the world. My idea still is to have a cruise liner in the middle of the channel and take all the refugees on there and then sail it back to Albania. But I imagine that isn't part of the cunning plan.
So essentially, for you, it would make no material difference whether we put these people on cruise ships. I suppose the material difference would be that they wouldn't actually set foot in the UK. And does that actually change anything when it comes to making it easier to make sure they never set foot in the UK?
That's difficult. I don't think you're right there, Patrick, because
they're on
if the cruise liner's in British waters and you tie it up at the cruise terminal in Dover, even though you don't unload them onto UK, I think that still would count as being in Britain.
That's interesting, actually, yes, because I hadn't actually thought that they would then maybe tie them up somewhere in Dover. I'd assumed, probably wrongly, actually, that they would just drop anchor in the middle of the channel, which, to be fair, is still ours, isn't it? Yeah. So, yes, I suppose it wouldn't really make anything. It would just potentially reduce the cost of hotels. And maybe, well, I think there's a lot of social elements to this as well, to be fair, because I think a lot of people in especially rural, smaller communities are now seeing hundreds of, let's be honest, mostly young men plonked in the middle of their town or village or whatever, and they've got certain concerns about that. So I suppose it would alleviate that. But you've heard this all before. Is this just pie in the sky?
Well, this seems to be something that the Home Office are considering. But I reiterate, it's no good if they're going to just tie these up at Dover docks and stick them on cruise liners there. If you really want to make a difference in the middle of the channel, further down in international waters, and don't let them land on the UK at all.
OK, all right. What happened to the idea of a giant wave machine in the channel?
Oh, that's just ridiculous. That's the same as pushing the boats back. It's just never going to happen, and technically you just couldn't do it. I mean
I must say, can I just say, it brought up brilliant images for me of, because clearly that was just the last idea of someone who was completely desperate, where they're all in an ideas meeting at the Home Office, and everyone's like, right, we're running out of hotels, lads. We're running out of hotels. We've got the ECHR breathing down our neck. We've got all these lefty lawyers. Wave machine. Yes, get in. That's the. I mean, it was never going to work, was it? But now cruise ships might be the actual solution. So there we go. I mean, I suppose the idea would be how many disused cruise ships have we got as well? You don't tend to see that many of them knocking about, although have we got a lot?
Oh, there are
Bingo.
a number of cruise ships. Yeah, you could do it. I mean, I believe the Dutch are doing it as well. They're putting migrants on cruise ships and using them as floating hotels. I mean, it's just another place to put people. But it doesn't solve the problem. The problem is stopping the people in the first instance.
OK, all right. Well, look, thank you very, very much for joining me on that one. We're going to be talking about that a little bit throughout the show as well. I've essentially been asking whether or not people at home think that it's a valid idea to start putting some of these people coming across the channel on cruise ships. Practically, as former Chief Immigration Officer for UK Border Force, Kevin Saunders, said there, practically it avails nothing to us in the sense that they're still basically in Britain and the law still applies as it currently does, and there would still be some kind of cost element to it. But I can't help but wonder whether or not socially it's a lot more palatable, whether or not we're seeing now the idea of these hotels popping up in your local neighbourhood, your local town, whether or not we're having to accept that we're still going to have these hotels, but we are running out of room for them, and we can't have tent cities in the cold, and so we're going to have to lob them onto various different cruise ships. What do you think about all of this? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Make sure you get in touch. But I've got a statement from the Home Office. Now, there we go. The Home Office said, we take the welfare of those in our care incredibly seriously and work closely with local authorities to ensure arrangements are safe and appropriate for individuals. That was the Home Office there. Make sure that you do get in touch. That email once more, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Coming up, the Prime Minister is attending the British-Irish Council meeting in Blackpool today, in the hope that he can find some solution to the continuing crisis over power sharing in Northern Ireland. We've got all of that coming your way. Plus, we're revealing Britain's most prolific speed camera, and we're having the debate to end all debates. Cyclists versus road users. Who's the real menace on the roads? And as you can see on your screens there, 3 Lions in Qatar. The World Cup squad has been announced. Gareth Southgate has let the cat out of the bag. A couple of surprises in there. But I'm going to be asking whether or not, actually, it's too late for fans to boycott it. Do you think we should be boycotting it? My main focus should be on the big advertising companies. I don't think fans should miss out. I don't think players should miss out. But I think these people who are spending millions, if not billions of pounds to advertise in a banner in a stadium that was built by, in some cases, now dead slaves, I think, frankly, is a little bit hypocritical. I'll be back in a moment.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, the Prime Minister is attending the British-Irish Council meeting in Blackpool today in the hope that he can find some solution to the continuing crisis over power sharing in Northern Ireland. Good luck with that. He'll be meeting the Irish Taoiseach Michael Martin as the Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris has warned that he will have to call an election for Stormont and cut the pay of the Stormont Assembly members. But let's now speak to GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very much. What's the latest for us, please?
So, Rishi Sunak is the first British Prime Minister to go to this British-Irish Council. Since 2007, that was Gordon Brown. The reason he's doing it is he's really hoping that in showing up and talking with the Irish Taoiseach, that they can perhaps really start to make progress on this vexed issue of the Northern Irish Protocol. He's expected to say that, you know, they are all very, very keen to get power sharing back up and running in Northern Ireland. Of course, there has been no functioning government there since February. The Democratic Unionist Party have made it very clear they will not go into government until the Irish Protocol is sorted. So clearly there is a real need. I mean, we've been here before, haven't we? The signs are good, but obviously there have been and remain big stumbling blocks. But there does seem to be a real appetite to get this sorted. And of course, next Easter will be the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement, as it's called, because it was signed on a Good Friday that really brought peace to Northern Ireland. President Joe Biden is going to be there. So there really is a desire on all sides to get this protocol issue addressed, to get then the administration back up and running in Northern Ireland so that people can finally move on from this. While Rishi Sunak is there, he will also be meeting with the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Wales, Mark Drakeford. Actually, he's zooming in because he's got COVID. Members also there from the Isle of Man, from Guernsey, from Jersey. It's not just the Irish government and the Westminster government. So we will see what happens. But certainly the sounds are positive, but there won't be a breakthrough today, obviously, but it might just help to move things along in the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's negotiations with Maros Sefcovic and the European Commission.
Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster there, our political reporter in Westminster for us. Right, now, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. First, of course, I'm going to be, I'm going to be doing loads, actually, because coming up, yes, it's hard to tell sometimes, isn't it? But I'll tell you, coming up, we are going to be talking about whether or not we should be putting migrants on cruise ships. That's the latest solution, apparently. Not sure that will work or really get to the heart of the issue. We're also going to be talking about Gareth Southgate announcing his England World Cup squad. We know the Welsh squad, not that they'll be there that long, all right? And I will also ask, is it too late for football fans to boycott the competition? That's what I want to know. And who's the biggest menace? OK, it came to me today. They were announcing that the Britain's most lucrative speed camera, and it just got me thinking, actually, stuff about our roads and how the fact that I think they're trying to price drivers out of driving. I got fined 60 quid on the way in and out of Birmingham when I went to cover the Conservative Party conference. Did not realise there was a low emission zone. But who's the biggest menace on the road? Is it cyclists or drivers? Let's find out after the news.
Good afternoon, it's 3:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Over 7 million people are now waiting to start routine hospital treatment in England, a new record high. The latest data released by NHS England shows that over 400,000 people have been waiting more than a year. A&E waiting times have reached their highest levels since 2010, and 1 in 5 patients who've had operations cancelled had to wait longer than 28 days for a new appointment. Train drivers at 12 operators are set to strike on the 26th of November. Members of ASLEF are involved in a long-running dispute over pay. They're among several rail unions on strike this month, including the RMT and Unite. Meanwhile, a tube strike's causing disruption across London today, with limited services on the Underground. And 100,000 civil servants have voted for a national strike over pay, pensions and jobs. The Public and Commercial Services Union says the move means industrial action will take place across a range of services. Workers affected include driving test examiners, border force officials and job centre staff. Downing Street says the Prime Minister has spoken to Ukraine's president, reiterating the UK's unwavering support for the country. Rishi Sunak this morning reassured Volodymyr Zelensky that the UK would continue providing military aid, including more than 25,000 extreme weather kits for troops. It follows the withdrawal of Russian troops from the strategic southern city of Kherson yesterday. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.1672 and €1.1476. The price of gold is £1,500 and 62 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,386 points.
All right, OK, we're back. Well, the England manager Gareth Southgate has named his 26-man squad for the World Cup in Qatar. The FA made the announcement on the England Twitter feed. Let's have a look at the squad in full, shall we? Jordan Pickford, Nick Pope and Arsenal's Aaron Ramsdale are the 3 goalkeepers. Injuries for Chelsea defenders Reece James and Ben Chilwell means there's an opportunity for Liverpool's Trent Alexander-Arnold and Ben White of Arsenal to return to the squad. Kyle Walker is included, despite, of course, his recent injury problems. It's a similar situation for his Manchester City teammate Calvin Phillips, who gets a chance along with Leicester's James Maddison. There's a surprise call-up for Crystal Palace midfielder Conor Gallagher, and Newcastle forward Callum Wilson is preferred as support for Harry Kane up front. There's no place for Brentford's in-form striker Ivan Toney or, of course, Tammy Abraham of Roma. So, Harry Kane will captain England at the tournament. That starts on Sunday, the 20th of November. But let's go live now to GB News' national reporter, Paul Hawkins, who's at England's training base at St George's Park. Paul, thank you very much. Always a very controversial time when any England manager announces their squad. People from various different clubs saying he should be in, he shouldn't be in, all of this stuff. I mean, it is actually quite a big call from Gareth Southgate, who I think was at pains to say that he's already spoken to those who didn't make it and let them down gently, didn't he?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, in the press conference he gave, an hour and a half ago, he said that the players that had been left out had been called by him, but he hasn't necessarily called all the players that were in. So Callum Wilson included because of his top form for Newcastle this season. He didn't actually call him, but he did let everyone else know who had missed out. He stressed that the balance of this squad is really important, and he actually mentioned the change to the substitution rules. He factored that into his squad selection. So you can make 5 substitutions at this World Cup in 3 windows during the game outside of half-time. And then you can make another one if there is extra time in the knockout phases. And he's taken that into account when selecting this squad. As you mentioned, Calvin Phillips, who hasn't really featured for Manchester City this season because of injuries, only played 54 minutes since making his comeback, has been selected. He's also, and by Gareth Southgate's own admission, he's admitted that Harry Maguire is out of form for Manchester United, but he's still included him based on it's kind of, I think he feels a sense of loyalty towards Harry Maguire, given the service that he's given to the national team, certainly in the past. 21 of these 26 players featured at the last Euro squad. Some of them also played at the 2018 World Cup. Remember, England reaching the semi-finals where they went out to Croatia. So there is experience in this side, and Gareth Southgate believes it's got the right balance to take them through the tournament.
Yes, indeed. Look, I suppose the big question, Paul, before I let you get going is, do you think it's going to come home?
I'm not going to say, frankly, because there's so many unknowns, especially with this World Cup being in Qatar, given that it's in a different part of the world at a different time of year. And this is actually quite crucial, and I should have mentioned this before, which is that we've still got one round of Premier League matches to go this weekend, and then effectively the tournament starts the following weekend. Now, that's never happened before. When you go back to the 2018 World Cup, there was a month's gap between the end of the Premier League season, then the squad could assemble, they could maybe even fit in a few friendlies. Gareth Southgate could have a look at the players, and then he'd have a much better idea about the first 11 for the first match of the World Cup. There's only a week's gap between this Premier League weekend coming up and then the start of the World Cup. So really, there's still a lot of unknowns about players' form and fitness, and so it's difficult to say how that's going to affect how England perform at this World Cup. It's good, and that's going to be the same, of course, for all the national sides out there.
Yeah, indeed. Look, thank you very much, Paul Hawkins there. Just announcing the fact that the England squad is out there. Yes, do you think that this time, maybe this time it will actually come home? The build-up to this World Cup has been pretty non-existent, hasn't it? I can't remember a World Cup where there's been so little talk about it. We're discussing it now. That's because Gareth Southgate's just lobbed his team out there. But it's been a bit of a damp squib so far anyway. I suppose it's because the Premier League is carrying on. But anyway, we'll have to wait and see how we all get on there. But moving on from the England squad lineup, a poll has suggested that a large majority of people in Britain think the World Cup should not be held in Qatar because of its position on gay rights. Homosexuality is illegal in Qatar. It attracts punishments of up to 7 years in prison. Despite this and other serious human rights concerns, FIFA members voted in 2010 to award the 2022 tournament to the Gulf state. But should footy fans boycott the prestigious event? To discuss this, I'm joined by the human rights campaigner Fraser McLean and the sports journalist and writer Harry Harris. Fraser, I'll start with you. Can I just change it a little bit slightly from the fans' side of things and talk more about your big corporate advertisers? Because they seem to get on the high horse a lot, don't they? You can't move in adverts these days for, I think, a lot of virtue signalling, frankly. Everything's got a rainbow flag in it. Everything's got, an incredibly multiracial, diverse family, the likes of which I'm not sure tend to exist in most British households, it must be said. But the idea of going and touting your wares in a banner in a stadium that was built by, in some cases, dead slaves in a country where it's illegal to be gay, I would have thought that some of those companies should be not there, not advertising. Your views?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think they have had to look and make a decision, and in too many cases the money talks. So you've got an event here where I think every minute of football played there'll have been 2 to 3 workers killed. You've had a widespread human rights sector come out and say this is a inappropriate location, fans won't be safe, and yet here they are advertising, and here are a number of high-profile individuals agreeing to go and be ambassadors as well.
Yeah, well, that's another thing, isn't it? And I thoroughly enjoyed watching Gary Neville have his pants pulled down on Have I Got News For You over this very issue. But I'm joined as well, of course, by Harry Harris. And Harry, can you remember a tournament where politics and sport have been so intermingled?
Yeah, yes, more or less all the time. I've covered 4 or 5 World Cups. You go back to 1986. I was there in Mexico. England played Argentina not long after the Falklands War. So,
and that game famously ended with no controversy whatsoever, and we never talk about it.
Well, all a point I would make is, hands up, I can't find a single person who thinks this is the right place and right time and right conditions in which to play a World Cup. Not one single person, certainly not in this country, probably not in Europe. There will be people in Africa, obviously, they're more aligned to FIFA, more aligned to the Middle East, and they have a different view. But what we have at the moment is fans going to a World Cup. I mean, it's not the first time. It goes back quite some way anyway.
Yeah.
You know, these tournaments aren't for the fans. Let's make no mistake. You know, anyone must be pretty naive to think that the fans count in this world of high finance where, as the other guy rightly said, you know, money talks. And this is clearly a decision taken by people who took backhanders to make the decision. It's corrupt. No one in their right
100%.
mind would have voted for it. And even Sepp Blatter now says it was a wrong decision.
Yeah, exactly. Presumably the money's run out. But I'll just throw it back over to you, Fraser, human rights campaigner. If professional footballers, male footballers in the Premier League don't really feel comfortable enough to come out and say that they're gay, despite the fact that clearly there's quite a few of them who must be, just simple maths and numbers tells you that, and speaking to other footballers as well, tells you exactly that. The likes of Gary Lineker was saying, oh, wouldn't it be a great thing if someone came out as gay in Qatar? Well, it wouldn't be, would it, really? I mean, if they're not comfortable doing it over here, I would have thought that it wouldn't be a particularly great thing doing it over there. I don't know. What's your take on it?
I totally agree. I mean, to go wider than that, I think football is a rare sport that's almost universally accessible. You know, anyone can play, and billions of people play across the world. And yet, the fact that this World Cup is supposed to be a representation of the sport is laughable. They've actually shipped in, under the pretense of false promises, low-paid, exploited labour, worked to death in many cases. And not only that, but they, you know, have certain rules and certain traditions in the community that will exclude a great number of people who don't match the ideal, you know, profile of who they want there and who they want on show.
Yeah.
So I totally agree.
Yeah, I mean, also, looking at the stadiums, it might be brand spanking new. The one we've just seen on our screen there looks like a tiramisu. But, Harry, final word over to you, sports journalist and writer Harry Harris. Is it coming home? Is this the year?
Oh, don't make me laugh, really. I mean,
come on, have a bit of optimism.
You've just seen the squad. I mean, we don't have a centre-half worth his name. No, I mean, the squad is out of date. There's a few new faces, but you rightly pointed out...
Who would you have had in it then? You know, quickly, come on, who would you have had in it?
It's not a question of who you have in it. It's a question of how the team... No, it's not a question of selection. It's a question of, you know, is the talent of a high enough standard? Is there a Gary Lineker to score all the goals? Is there a Paul Gascoigne to create them? Is there a Terry Butcher to stop them? Is there a Peter Shilton in goal? No. So, you know, unfortunately, you know, it doesn't really have that quality of player at the highest possible level. I would go for an African nation. No African nation has won the World Cup. I would even say 2 African nations in the final. It's a real shame for Senegal because I really fancy them to win it, that Sadio Mane is now not going to be there. That's a big tragedy for them. But Cameroon, I think, will probably make the final. And I think the best England can hope for would be quarterfinals. I'm not even sure they'll make that.
Well, I'll tell you what, as long as you're not doing the motivational speech just before they walk out on the pitch, we might stand a chance. But thank you very much. I appreciate your withering honesty. Harry Harris, journalist and writer as well, of course, joined by human rights campaigner Fraser McLean. Right, moving away from that now. There's loads more coming your way because coming up, the speed camera, the singular speed camera that catches the most drivers in Britain has been revealed. Can somebody go and just turn it round, maybe? Just a thought. Anyway, the camera, which sits on the A40 in northwest London, has busted a whopping 49,000 speeding drivers over a 12-month period. Surely it's one of the ones that must be set at 20 miles an hour and we don't realise it. Anyway, but are speeding fines just a money-making scheme? And are drivers really the biggest menace on UK roads? They're being priced out of the market left, right and centre. They want us all on those pathetic little scooters or those unicycle things. Anyway, back in a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
OK, so on the show today, we've been discussing reports that the Home Office is looking at disused cruise ships to house migrants to cut the cost of hotels. And lots of you, unsurprisingly, are beginning in touch with your thoughts on this very idea. Is it time that we use disused cruise ships to house migrants? Club 18 to 30. Anyway, migrants could get transferred from their boats in the Channel straight onto the ships, meaning they don't set foot on UK land, they can't disappear into UK communities, which they can do when they get to hotels. We've got to the stage where something innovative is needed. Cruise ships have the facilities too. That is an email in gbviews@gbnews.uk from Caroline. Caroline, interesting stuff, because as I understand it, and given the fact this hasn't been announced yet, I'm willing to be corrected in future, but my understanding of it is if they are on essentially British boats moored somewhere near Britain, probably in the English Channel, and technically they are in Britain, so they could still stick to those same asylum laws that some would argue have been keeping people here indefinitely for far too long. However, you're right and spot on. I think this is a big issue, which, frankly, it would stop them absconding into the communities. And I am waiting to be sitting here one day reading out the news report where the facts and figures come out about how many children are missing from these hotels, how many people we've not kept track of. I mean, I've been to numerous ones of these hotels, done reports from various hotels, and every single time it just seems as though these people can come and go as they please. So if you get whiff that your asylum claim is going to be turned down, you'd be straight off, wouldn't you? So, yes, I absolutely agree, Caroline. It might be a safer route. Les has been on. Great idea, putting the migrants on ships. They have to be offshore to be effective. Yes, OK. And Mary's been on. Thank you very much, Mary. If the cruise liners have good facilities and people are housed in good conditions, it could be possible for this to work. But we have to be careful that people aren't on cruise ships for years at a time. Yeah, I mean, anyone who's been on a cruise ship will tell you, you know, after a few days that you get tired of the same old buffet, don't you? And that lady who finished 6th on Pop Idol comes on with the same cabaret tunes and you just think, you know what, I'll just swim back to Calais, actually. gbviews@gbnews.uk. But moving on from that, talking of things that might take years to come to fruition, something very speedy indeed. The speed camera that catches the most drivers in Britain has been revealed as one that sits in northwest London. And it's probably the one that did me, and has snapped almost 50,000 speeding drivers over the year. God, 1 year. Anyway, drivers are fined for their speeding, with the average penalty totalling £181. But who are the real menaces of the road? It got me thinking. When you drive your car now, you pay something like 10 quid to take it off your driveway in London because of the congestion charges and all of that stuff, especially if, like Muggins over here, you went and got a diesel. Yeah. Anyway, then you've got the ULEZ charge, and then you've got all sorts of stuff. You get fined left, right and centre every single time you move it. You can't drive a car without picking up a ticket. Or maybe it's just the way I drive. Anyway, is it a concerted push to get us all out of our cars and onto bikes? But I wanted to know, as someone who's fallen foul of a cyclist or two in my time, who is the real menace of the road? Is it drivers or cyclists? Joining me now is the cycling vigilante, Dave Sherry, and criminal lawyer, Nick Freeman. Good stuff, guys. I've always wanted to do kind of cyclist versus driver in a sense. But Dave Sherry, I'll start with you, the cycling vigilante. When you lot cycle 3 abreast, oh, it winds me up. Can you just not?
Why?
Because it's annoying. You're on a country lane, you're driving around, and you lot are all there chatting in your Lycra 3 abreast. Just tuck in a bit, be courteous road users.
Yeah, but do we tell you how to drive your vehicle?
Well, in a way, because you're slowing me down. Yes, you are. I've only got one. You present me with one option, which is to drive at 10 miles an hour. No, but seriously, who do you think is worse on the roads? I can guess the answer to this. Cyclists or drivers? Who's the more inconsiderate?
Well, cyclists don't need insurance. Car drivers do, because they name, kill and injure.
OK, criminal lawyer Nick Freeman, I'll bring you into it now. What do you think? Do you think that that's a bit of a misconception?
Well, look, I think cyclists are inconsiderate. I concede, of course, they do far less damage as a rule. Of course they do. But in terms of consideration, they can basically cycle with impunity with no idea who's on a cycle at any one time. So they're not accountable. They don't cycle responsibly. They go through red lights. They break the law all the time, and they have very little regard for motorists who contribute massively, as you pointed out, to the finance of our roads. So, of course, driving in a car or a lorry or van is potentially far more dangerous, but cyclists are causing problems not only with motorists in terms of the way they drive, but of course they're not restricted by a speed limit, for example. So you get the ridiculous situation that in London cars are sitting at 20 miles an hour and cyclists are cycling at 25 miles an hour and not breaking the law. They don't have a drink drive limit. They don't have a drug drive limit. They have offences of being unfit. And the legislation that currently exists for cyclists is so out of date. So, when you have the strange scenario when someone's killed, you're bringing in very anachronistic legislation with a maximum sentence of 2 years to deal with it. So,
All right, I'll bring Dave back in now, the cycling vigilante. Dave, why don't cyclists just have number plates so that when you go through a red light or you are speeding or things like that, then you can get a fine as well? Is cycling just an excuse to break the law?
No, I've seen police on Oxford Street giving out fixed penalty notices and fines to cyclists for jumping red lights. So don't need a number plate, just need an officer at the roadside to stop and detain and gather the details to send the fine to.
Drivers have to deal with number... Sorry, just quickly, because drivers have to deal with the fact that they've got a number plate and there are cameras. If you haven't got a number plate, unless an officer, a bobby on the beat, who, let's be honest, he's probably chasing a stabbing around the Oxford Street area to begin with, decides to stop a cyclist, then you just get away with it, don't you?
Well, this is it. The thing is, motorists know they are the cash cows. They are the easy targets. And, you've got to pay your road tax, your insurance, your UZ, congestion charge, MOT, Cyclists don't emit an emission, not required to have insurance because they're less likely to cause an injury or name or damage anyone or property. So, I feel sorry for motorists because they are victimised and milked.
Well, there you go. And on that note, maybe we've actually got a point of agreement. Nick Freeman, do you think that now local councils just look at motorists and just hear just the cash register just pinging and pinging and pinging?
100%. There's 2 roads in London now, I think in Wandsworth, where actually, because apparently motorists have been speeding, the council have actually taken over the regulation of the speed. So what's happening is, if you get caught speeding on these 2 roads, the motorist gets a £135 fine. It's a PCN, so there's no criminal conviction, no endorsement, no penalty points, etc., just cash to the council. And this is the start, this is right at the beginning of a new era where council are going to see what great sources of revenue speeding motorists are. The speed limits are too slow for motorists. They're too slow in cities and they're too slow on the motorways. We need flexibility. There's no sensible approach everywhere a motorist looks, it's war against him. And it's unfair and it's wrong. It makes no sense at all. So someone needs to get a grip and try and make things count. So we collaborate together and make our roads safer. But also that doesn't mean slowing everybody down. That's not the answer to every problem.
It doesn't, absolutely. I'd have autobahns left, right and centre right across the UK. Now, Dave, the cycling vigilante Sherry, you looked quite happy there at the idea of motorists being milked dry. Do you actually just hate people who own cars?
No, I've got a car myself. I don't have to pay tax.
When you drive it? Why do you laugh? So why do you laugh so much at the idea of motorists being milked dry and penalised?
Well, because you just got to think out of the box. Why not get a cycle? I've got an electric car. I don't have to pay visual emission duty.
Yeah.
You know, it's just thinking out of the box. People want a 1.8 litre diesel or a higher performance Land Rover. You're going to have to pay. You know, it's common sense. Stop whining about it. Get with the routine and realise that, you know, the planet's in a bad situation at the moment and vehicles are the main number one contributory fact to greenhouse emissions and global warming.
I would argue maybe China is the number one contributory factor, but I take your point. I take your point. Right, we've got a load of bikes as well, to be fair, mate. The cycling vigilante Dave Sherry and criminal lawyer Nick Freeman, thank you very much. We got to the bottom of that one way or the other. It does look as though motorists, of course, was what we already knew, they're being rinsed absolutely dry. Is now the right time to admit that I don't know how to ride a bike? There we go. I've got some skin in the game there. I'd also like to apologise to Michael Rudd Dean, who is Rod Stewart. He's a tribute artist to Rod Stewart, who performs on cruise ships, who said that I was potentially doing a disservice to people who perform on cruise ships as a way of entertaining the migrants. I would just say, Rod Stewart, I was certainly not referring to you. If you were performing on that cruise ship, I would happily live there as well. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. In the next hour, strikes. When will it end? And those migrant cruise ships, plus a bit of Rod Stewart, by the sound of things, is the answer to almost £7 million a day costing taxpayers in migrant hotels to actually put them on disused cruise ships. I'll be back in a moment.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back, everybody. It's 4 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News. A jam-packed hour. We debate and discuss the biggest stories of the day. Are we on the verge of a national general strike? Within the last 24 hours, nurses, civil servants, train drivers as well announced that they'll all be walking out. Disputes over a range of issues, from pay to pensions to working conditions to staffing. Should we give in to their demands, or put our foot down against militant unions. And a cost-cutting idea, reportedly in the works from the Home Office, means that we might consider putting people coming over the Channel on disused cruise ships as opposed to housing them in hotels. Do you support that idea? Do you think it will actually work? GBviews at gbnews.uk. And kind of on that issue, but more the legal side of things, the boss of retailer Next, who apparently was a backer of Brexit, is urging the government to let more foreign workers into the UK to ease labour shortages. I am going to debate, is it an economic necessity to improve our immigration policy post-Brexit? Basically, more migrants. Have your say, GBviews at gbnews.uk. But before that, it's Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Our top story on GB News. Over 7 million people are now waiting to start routine hospital treatment in England. That's a new record high. The latest data released by NHS England shows that over 400,000 have been waiting more than a year. A&E waiting times have reached their highest levels since 2010, and 1 in 5 patients who've had operations cancelled had to wait longer than 28 days for a new appointment. That, as the Health Secretary says, he's had a constructive meeting with the Royal College of Nursing. The union's been urging the government to take action over pay or face disruption across the country. Steve Barclay says they've agreed to meet again soon in order to avoid industrial action. The government says the union is asking for a 17.6% pay boost. Now, train drivers at 12 operators are going to strike on the 26th of November. Members of ASLEF are involved in a long-running dispute over pay. They're among several rail unions on strike this month, including the RMT and Unite. Meanwhile, a tube strike is causing disruption across London today with limited services on the Underground. Passengers are urged to check before they travel, with problems expected to continue into tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, 100,000 civil servants have voted for a national strike over pay, pensions and jobs. The Public and Commercial Services Union says the move means industrial action will take place across a range of services. Workers affected include driving test examiners, border force officials and job centre staff. Downing Street says the Prime Minister has spoken to Ukraine's president, reiterating the UK's unwavering support for the country. Rishi Sunak this morning reassured Volodymyr Zelensky that the UK would continue to provide military aid, including more than 25,000 extreme weather kits for troops. It follows Russia's withdrawal yesterday from the strategic southern town of Kherson. And Rishi Sunak is this afternoon meeting leaders of the devolved nations and the Irish Premier for the first time since he became Prime Minister. He's expected to urge the nations to work together and build a future defined not by division but by unity. Mr Sunak is at the Irish-British Council Summit in Blackpool, where he's meeting his Irish counterpart Michael Martin and First Ministers Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford. The absence of a power-sharing executive means Northern Ireland won't be represented by any politicians at the talks. Peter Kyle, Shadow Secretary for Northern Ireland, says change is needed.
There's got to be a change of attitude. There's got to be more emphasis on Northern Ireland, and the interests of Northern Ireland have got to be put first, not as it has been for years now, neglected and used as a tool to beat a political tool to beat the EU with or other issues.
Now, in other news today, a man from Somerset has been sentenced to life for murdering his partner, who died 21 years after he set her on fire. 58-year-old Stephen Craig left Jacqueline Kirk severely disfigured in the attack in Weston-super-Mare back in 1998. Craig had already served 15 years in prison but was arrested again last year after Jacqueline died from her injuries in 2019. His sentence carries a minimum of 15 years to be served. The Queen Consort has commemorated victims of the nation's wars at a ceremony at Westminster Abbey. Camilla laid a cross in the field of remembrance in memory of those who died in past conflicts, with a 2-minute silence observed this morning. More than 1,000 veterans gathered in the grounds of the Abbey. The England manager Gareth Southgate has named his 26-man squad for the World Cup in Qatar, which kicks off in just over a week's time. The FA made the announcement on the England Twitter feed. Leicester midfielder James Maddison has been included, as have Manchester United forward Marcus Rashford, Newcastle striker Callum Wilson and Man City defender Kyle Walker, despite recent injury problems. Speaking to the press earlier, Southgate said having a bigger squad has its benefits.
So having 26 available meant that we were probably able to take a couple of risks that you might not have been able to with 23. But we think the balance is there and we've got covering the positions we need. We're lighter on depth in some positions than other in our country, but we think we've got everything covered.
That's it. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
Welcome back, everybody. A triple blow in the last 24 hours as nurses were joined by 100,000 civil servants and train drivers in announcing strike action. This afternoon, the Health Secretary Steve Hadley met with the Royal College of Nursing General Secretary Pat Cullen. He tweeted, constructive meeting with the Royal College of Nursing, covering a number of topics. Nurses do an incredible job, and I regret some union members have voted for strikes. My priority is to keep patients safe and minimise disruption. My door is always open, he says. And we have agreed to meet again shortly. But are we now staring down the barrel of a general strike like those in the 80s? Joining me live now is former industrial editor at The Sun. It's Charles Ray. Charlie, good to see you. Right, now, how bad is this going to get? Are we witnessing it? I wonder whether or not Mick Lynch was like the gateway drug for a lot of people striking now. We had the RMT, it was nurses, and then obviously we're going back to rail now, and then we're going to have civil servants, it'll be teachers next, and what next? Grave diggers.
Well, we're going to have university lecturers as well later.
Yeah, but no one would notice about that, Charlie. In fact, probably
it's ridiculous.
The quality of degrees would go up.
Yeah, well, we're not going to have a general strike, Patrick, because the only people that can call a general strike is the TUC, as they did in the only general strike that we've had in 1926. And we lost, in that year, we lost 162 million working days. In the 1970, when it was the start of, all the industrial trouble that happened then, you remember the winter of discontent and everything else, 1970, we lost 10 million working days. This year so far, the latest figures say it's only 150,000. I know that doesn't sound a lot, and I know it's terrible for all the people who get affected by the railways and everything else. But we're faced with a situation where there is a cost of living crisis going on. The unions, some of the unions, appear to be taking advantage of this.
Yeah, of course they are.
And wanting to get their fair deserts.
But one of the things that I'm trying to figure out about all of this is actually how much leverage they've really got. I understand the idea of nurses potentially going on strike in the run-up to Christmas. Yeah, that's going to have a massive impact. You've got train drivers, etc., railway workers. But if the cost of living is really that bad and they have been as severely underpaid for the length of time they're claiming to be severely underpaid for, and now we've got people set up to work from home anyway, like we have. Normal people don't necessarily need to take the train into work, and people are used to a lockdown, aren't they? I'm just wondering whether or not Rishi Sunak can outlast the strikers.
Well, yeah, as we've had 3 prime ministers already in the last couple of months, you have to add a big question mark over whether Sunak can last. Just on the point of the nurses, though, Steve Hadley in his tweet says that unfortunately some members of the nurses union have taken strike action. Steve, I'm sorry, matey, there's more than some members, it's a majority of members who've decided to take action. And I think of all the unions that are involved, the nurses are the one that the country will feel the most sorry for. 17% of which they're asking for is ridiculous. It's a negotiating point. But they do deserve a fair and healthy pay rise rather than us all standing on a doorstep banging a tin with a wooden spoon.
Well, that was pointless anyway, wasn't it?
Do deserve it.
Yeah, look, that was pointless anyway. That was pointless anyway, yes. That whole business, the maniacal clapping. I mean, I think one of the only reasons I did it was just because I felt like crying at the time anyway, so I thought I was sick of doing it on my own in my room, so I'd go outside and do it with people I'd never met on my street. But there we go. It was quite funny, actually, because we had some people who'd recently just moved in. We digress here a bit, Charlie, but who'd recently just moved into the flat next door to mine, who were not from this country, who I think for a while thought this is just what we did every week as a nation. Yeah. They were massively confused by it, but there we go. I can't help but wonder with this. I'm softening a little bit. Yesterday, I was very angry about this nurses' strike. I was very angry about it, and I still realistically don't think that they should be doing it morally. And I make no excuses for that. I think if you go into a job where you can Google your salary and your likely pay increase, and you can Google the amount of student debt you might have to be in when you get in there, and you Google the working hours and all of this stuff, I don't think you have too much of a right, frankly, to leave your post and then potentially let people die, right, as a result of that. Yeah. I'm dead against that. But I'm softening it now, and I'm just thinking, all right, how much do we give them? How much would they take? Because 17.6% is mad. So what could we give them in order to stop them striking?
I think probably whatever you give the nurses, that is a trigger for everyone else jumping on the bandwagon for a start off. I agree, though, the nurses deserve money. I would have thought that if they sat down with the negotiators, anything round about 8 to 10%, which is probably the going rate for inflation, would be good for them. It would be a very healthy pay rise. Not as good as they want, but maybe next year they might get some more. But it's a dangerous game for the government to play, because everyone else, the police, the firemen, other services that we have that we rely on, will all want to say, hang on a second, we do as good a job as the nurses. Why don't we get it? And the train drivers, well, they take us around and everything else. But, of course, some of those guys are earning an awful lot of money.
Well, this is it. And apparently, anyway, according to Olivia Utley, our political reporter who educated me on this yesterday, whilst there is a recruitment crisis and a retention crisis in nursing, apparently the same does not exist for people like train drivers. In fact, apparently they're always oversubscribed when it comes to that, which does again beg the question why on earth we would ever want to give in to strike action with them. But I just wondered, Charlie, you obviously have been around the industrial action community, if you want to call them that, for a rather long time now, and I makes it sound like a Facebook group, doesn't it? But there you go. I just wonder whether or not do they just want to bring the government to its knees? Is that kind of what it is? Do they just want a Labour government?
Well, unfortunately, they had a Labour government in the 70s twice. Wilson and then Callaghan. That didn't go well for them. That sandwiched Ted Heath in there, who lost the election as a result of the industrial action. Yeah, I do believe that a number of unions have got on their minds that we could force a general election, we could down a Conservative government. There's no question that that's part of their strategy in trying to get rid of a Conservative government.
OK, all right, look, thank you very much, Charles Ray there, who is the former industrial editor at The Sun. Moving on now to a story that I know is very close to a lot of your hearts, and that is what's been going on in the Channel, because the Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration has called on the government to give some certainty to asylum seekers by speeding up approvals instead of housing them in hotels, arguing that irrespective of the number of stars it may have, temporary accommodation is grim. Well, I'm not quite sure about that, but there we go. David Neal, a retired Royal Military Police officer, called the current backlog of cases inexcusably high and said it was in the interest of everyone in this country to get people out of the contingency asylum accommodation. But reports today say that the Home Office is looking for a solution. And in fact, suggestions are that Suella Braverman is considering using disused cruise ships to house some of these people, currently costing the taxpayer about £7 million a day in hotels. Could disused cruise ships be the answer? Cruises are currently being used to house Ukrainian refugees in Scotland, and apparently they were used as well when we had the Afghan refugee situation in the wake of the rather disastrous evacuation of Afghanistan. But should they be re-established to tackle the illegal Channel crossings? Joining me now is immigration lawyer at Healy's LLP, Ivan Sampson. Ivan, thank you very much. Good to have you back on the show. OK, all right, look, If a 4-star hotel in Windsor isn't good enough for these people, let's get them on a cruise ship. We'll provide the entertainment. There'll be a buffet and, I don't know, maybe even a swimming pool. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea. In fact, it's really strange. One of my clients contacted me and asked me to put forward 3 cruise ships they've got moored in Greece. And he sent me some figures of what it's going to cost on a daily basis. So it's really odd that the Suella Braverman's come up with this plan. But we use already cruise ships for prisoners, and there's no reason why we can't use cruise ships for asylum seekers. There's also the there's the perception of getting on British soil. And keeping them offshore, I think, is much better than asylum seekers or people who are not genuine asylum seekers actually touching our shores. Those that have their applications approved, we brought to shore, and those who don't get sent back to France.
Well, I do think as well that it would alleviate one of the main issues for people, which is, despite the fact that people go, oh, you must be really racist, you don't want a migrant hotel in your area. Actually, from speaking to people, and my own personal view on this is actually that there is safety concerns when it is the risk of them absconding. There's safety concerns for people within those hotels as well, especially young children, for example. I mean, I was able to just wander straight into the Maidenhead Holiday Inn. If I had nefarious intentions, anything could have happened, you know, but I just walked in and took a couple of videos and spoke to some staff and walked out. There was no security whatsoever. And I went to have a look the other day as well. It didn't seem like they'd beefed it up. So I do think that maybe putting these people offshore, as it were, would alleviate a lot of the tensions that potentially are about to kick off if you keep dropping them in sometimes very rural, small areas. Maybe this is the option.
Well, I've already written to the Home Secretary to say we could refuse entry to anyone who doesn't have identity on national security grounds. We have rights within the convention to do that. So that would override the Refugee Convention. If the Home Secretary says that unless you prove identity, you cannot come on shore, and we would keep them offshore until those identities were proved, and we'd be right within our rights to do that on national security grounds. And I don't think anybody's going to argue with the Home Secretary if she did that. That would be a fair thing to do. If we don't know who you are, where you come from, what your background is, you shouldn't be allowed to assimilate into our communities.
No.
Where we have our loved ones, children, wives, and everyone else.
Ivan, can I just ask, I can see a problem coming down the line now. You, of course, are big on your human rights in the legal world. Would a migrant have to say that they suffered badly from seasickness and it would be against their human rights to keep them there?
No, Patrick, but have you ever thought of going to stand-up comedy? Because I heard your comments before and I was in stitches. Look,
no, I tend to take the sit-down approach.
This is a serious matter, and I think it's absolutely right. If we don't know who you are, where you come from, and you haven't proved it, you should not be allowed to step foot on this soil. I think that's fair, and that would get the support of most of the country, including myself, a human rights lawyer. I've got a daughter, I've got a wife, and I've got family, and I'd like to know they're safe when they're walking the streets. We need to know who you are, where you come from, and if you can't prove it, then you remain.
OK, good stuff. All right, Ivan, look, thank you very much. Ivan, great to have you back on the show. Ivan Sampson there, who is, of course, an immigration lawyer at Healy's LLP. What do you make of that? So before he was saying there anyway, the cruise ship thing might actually be the solution to keep the human rights lawyers on side. How do you feel about this, whether or not we should have cruise ships being used for migrants in the Channel? It has been an option, offshore processing, technically, isn't it? Offshore processing, that hundreds, if not thousands of you email in about every single day. Why aren't we doing this? Maybe it's time. The costing of it, though, of course, could be another issue. I've got to now read out, apparently, something from the Home Office. The Home Office said, we take the welfare of those in our care incredibly seriously and work closely with local authorities to ensure arrangements and that they are safe and appropriate for individuals. There we go, that's the legal stuff out the way. Coming up, 3 lines in Qatar as Gareth Southgate announces his final England squad for the World Cup. We also know the Welsh squad, they won't be that long. But this report, advertisers have trimmed their advertising budgets over fears of being associated with the World Cup. Absolute codswallop, absolute codswallop. They'll be more than happy to have the big McDonald's golden arches over there, won't they, anyway? This is, of course, due to the host's human rights record, which is utterly, utterly appalling. Before that, let's take a look at your weather.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Tomorrow will be fairly similar to today. Again, very, very mild, quite blustery. Most places dry but cloudy. Why is the weather so mild at the moment? Well, track the isobars all the way down to the southwest. That is where our air is coming from, bringing warmth but also bringing a lot of cloud, and particularly close to this weather front, a lot of rain. We actually have a Met Office yellow warning in place. Persistent heavy rain, especially for Skye, other parts of the Highlands, though that rain really building up through the next 24 hours or so could cause some problems. The rain at times affecting maybe central Scotland, perhaps for a time for Northern Ireland. Drizzle at times for western parts of England and Wales, but many places away from the northwest dry. But look at these overnight temperatures, incredibly mild, above the average maximum for this time of year. It will be windy and particularly gusty for a time on Friday across southeast Scotland, so we have another Met Office yellow warning here. Still some drizzle at times around Western Hills. The rain pushing back towards Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland during Friday afternoon, perhaps easing in the far northwest. Again, elsewhere, most places dry and again exceptionally mild, 17, 18 Celsius. Could see a little bit more in the way of brightness across East Anglia and the southeast through Friday afternoon. That rain continues to slip south as we head through Friday night and into Saturday, but kind of grinds to a halt across the far north of England before heading back north during Saturday. Again, it's going to be a very mild start to Saturday. Again, most places cloudy. The wind's a little lighter on Saturday. That could make for some foggy conditions in places. Could be quite a murky old day on Saturday. If that mist and fog doesn't clear, well, temperatures may only be in the mid-teens, but with a bit of brightness, say North Wales, we could get up to the high teens in places. As for Sunday, well, again, most places dry, could be quite misty and murky, and again, very, very mild. Bye for now.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody. We've got loads coming your way. But just firstly, the Grenfell inquiry continues today with closing statements from lawyers acting for the company responsible for the fire safety at Grenfell. That's the Housing Secretary, and also the counsel to the inquiry, Richard Miller. Let's go live now, actually, to our national reporter, Ellie Costello. Ellie, thank you very much. Now, you're outside the inquiry forwards. What's going on?
Well, hi, Patrick. We're actually inside the inquiry room right now. We've very kindly been given access, and this is the room where for the past 4 days we have heard the closing statements from many bodies that were there or involved on the night of the 14th of June 2017, where 72 people so tragically lost their lives. We've been hearing those closing statements throughout the week, and there have been many survivors here in the room speaking about their experience of that night. And one of those people is Nabil Chakir, who I spoke to earlier. He actually lost 6 members of his family in the fire, and he told me what that night was like.
A night that I'll never, ever, ever forget, you know, looking for my loved ones, knowing if they had escaped. I lost my mother, my sister, my brother-in-law, and 3 nieces.
I'm so sorry, it's absolutely horrific. How do you feel 5 years on from that? And you must still be in huge amounts of pain, but you must also feel so much anger.
Nothing has changed. I feel just as worse as before. Until now, you know, it's nothing but pass the buck and everyone blaming each other, no one taking responsibility. So my pain and family's pain and everything, if not, it's got worse.
Well, as you can hear there, 5 years and 5 months on for survivors like Nabil. He's saying he feels worse than he did 5 years ago, and seeing all of this at the inquiry and hearing the closing statements makes it all the more painful for him. Well, in terms of criminal prosecutions, Patrick, the Metropolitan Police have said that no decisions will be expected until they see the conclusions of this inquiry. Now, Sir Martin Morbick is the chairman of this inquiry, and he said today that the report has already started. They're working really hard on it. They're hoping to have it released as soon as possible next year. And in that report, they are very importantly going to not only answer what happened that night, but why it happened, in the hope that they can give some sort of recommendation so that something like this never happens again. But for survivors like Nabil, they want answers. They want justice, and the wait for that will continue.
Ellie Costello, thank you very much for bringing us that report about the Grenfell inquiry. Right, we have got those coming your way. We are going to be dissecting this 3 Lions England squad that's going to go to Qatar and definitely, this time, definitely bring it home. It's coming home, people. Just give it a few weeks and we'll all be 9 pints deep in Trafalgar Square's fountain singing It's Coming Home and Sweet Caroline. Mark my words, this time it's real. Anyway, we'll have more on that coming your way very, very shortly. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Polly and a massive Poppy.
Patrick, thank you. The latest headlines this hour. Just over 7 million people in England are now waiting to start routine hospital treatment. That's a new record high. The latest data released by NHS England shows that over 400,000 patients have been waiting more than a year for treatment. A&E waiting times have also reached their highest levels since 2010, and 1 in 5 patients who've had surgery cancelled had to wait longer than 28 days for a new appointment. Train drivers across the UK are set to go out on strike on the 26th of November. Members of the ASLEF union are involved in a long-running dispute over pay. They're among several rail unions on strike this month, including the RMT and Unite. Meanwhile, a tube strike in London has caused disruption today with limited services on the Underground. 100,000 civil servants have voted for national strike action over pay, pensions and jobs. The Public and Commercial Services Union says the move means industrial action will take place across a range of services. Workers affected include driving test examiners, border force officials and job centre staff. And Downing Street says the Prime Minister has been speaking to Ukraine's president, reiterating the UK's unwavering support for his country. Rishi Sunak said this morning that he'd reassured President Zelensky the UK would continue to provide military aid, including more than 25,000 extreme weather kits for troops. It follows the withdrawal of Russian troops from the strategic southern city of Kherson yesterday. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Patrick is here now.
Well, within the last few hours, the England manager Gareth Southgate and his magic waistcoat has named his 26-man squad for the World Cup in Qatar, where we will go, win the Cup and finally bring it home. Let's have a look at that squad in full, shall we? Jordan Pickford, Nick Pope and Arsenal's Aaron Ramsdale are the three goalkeepers. Injuries for Chelsea defender Reece James, who believes he still should have been picked, and Ben Chilwell means that there's an opportunity for Liverpool's Trent Alexander-Arnold and Ben White of Arsenal to return to the squad. Kyle Walker's included, despite his recent injury problems. It's a similar situation for Manchester City teammate Calvin Phillips, who gets the chance along with Leicester's James Maddison. There's a surprise call-up for Crystal Palace midfielder Conor Gallagher as well, not least because his name makes it sound like he should play for Ireland. And Newcastle's forward Callum Wilson is preferred as support for Harry Kane up front, but there's no place for Brentford's informed striker Ivan Toney or Tammy Abraham of Roma. There we go. OK, well, forward Mason Mount apparently tweeted his delight a short while ago. I believe. Would probably be nice if we could see the tweet if we're talking about it. There we go. It's always an honour to be called up for the England squad. Ah, there we are. OK, that's Phil Foden, though. But there we go. Anyway, it's all going rather well. Joining me now, someone who's definitely here and in the right place, is sports broadcaster and journalist Aidan McGee. Aidan, thank you very much.
One correction, Ben White. He likes being called Benjamin, apparently.
What?
He likes being called Benjamin. He prefers Benjamin.
Well, I don't pander to the whims of sports people, mate.
All right.
It's Ben White, you know. He's like...
OK, he's Benjamin to his close friends and family.
Well, there you go. I'll never get close enough to Benjamin White. Yeah, exactly. Yes. OK, right. So this is the squad, is it, that's going to finally end the drought? It's coming home.
Well, look, I mean, there are no surprises, I don't think. I mean, look, he's included two risky players in the sense that Calvin Phillips only made his comeback last night from a shoulder injury. And here he is in contention to potentially play in 11 days' time against Iran. Gareth Southgate said he'd have to build up his fitness, so he's not somebody who's going to necessarily be ready and available immediately. But when you've got a 26-man option, then remember last World Cup it was only 23, and because of COVID and because of the narrowing of the schedule, each country is allowed to pick 3 extra players. So I'm not convinced he really wanted to pick Maddison. If he was keen on James Maddison.
Didn't he pick him once and then he didn't?
3 years ago.
Injured and he went out gambling or something?
He said he was ill, yeah. He said he was ill and he was seen out of a casino. Now, Gareth Southgate doesn't like that. Well, not one bit. He hasn't played for 3 years. His form, though, at club level has been irrepressible. So for me, in those attacking midfield roles, he is ahead of Phil Foden right now. He's ahead of Jack Grealish right now. He's certainly ahead of Raheem Sterling right now. We'll see how much Gareth Southgate has faith in him and trusts him if he starts some of the games. I think he may, utilising the 26-man option, I think he may have included him to stop any heat. But if I have a look at the omissions, Ivan Toney, he's had a decent season, but he's cooperating with the FA over a breach of the gambling code at the moment. That may have counted against him. Tyrone Mings, Villa were playing pretty well this season. Good record for England, left out. Calvert-Lewin for Everton.
Steven Gerrard did for him a bit at the start of the season, though, I think, didn't he? He called him out, took the armband off him.
Yeah. But as an England player, he's done all right. In a pool of 9 defenders, I was a little bit surprised.
Which include, by the way, Harry Maguire.
Yeah, I know. This is another one, Patrick. But again, he's a bit like Bobby Robson back in the old days. And even most England managers like players they can trust who've delivered in tournaments, irrespective of their form leading up to it. Marcus Rashford, very lucky to be in it. He wasn't even very good at Euro 2020 or the delayed Euro 2020. Yeah. He scored 4 goals in 13 games this season in a successful Man United side. Compare that to James Maddison, who obviously isn't a striker, but he's a supporting striker and he's a midfielder. 6 goals in 12 games in a side that's been in the bottom 3 most of the season and nearly sacked their manager 4 or 5 weeks ago. Yeah. So I think... But having said that, when you've got that option of 26 players, chuck them all in and deal with it. I mean, the reality, I've never known so much of a build-up or so much conjecture around the announcement of an England squad. And yet, the reality, same as every time, Patrick, probably about 6 or 7 of these players are not going to see a minute of action.
Well, no, that's true. And I can remember back in the day with the golden generation, I mean, look, what we do now for that team sheet, your Beckhams and all of this...
I don't know. No? I think that I'd rely on this lot more than...
Why? Because there's less prima donnas with expensive wives?
No. Well, no, not just that. Well, they didn't deliver. It didn't matter how many prima donnas there were with expensive wives.
But they
that doesn't matter
Sven
if they deliver.
Charge.
Yeah, but Sven was good in some senses. But Gareth Southgate has learned from his... No, I remember that story. Wow. But no, look back at... Gareth Southgate was on the periphery of that squad in the early 2000s when Sven-Göran Eriksson was there. He won 57 caps, I think it was. He played until 2004. He remembers the cliques. He remembers all the Arsenal players on the table, the Liverpool players on the table, the Chelsea players, Alan Shearer and all his mates on another table.
Yeah.
He also understands the folly of taking a player who's not fully match fit. So that's why it surprises me that he's thrown in Phillips and Walker, and yet they didn't include Reece James, who said, I can play.
I wonder whether or not Gareth Southgate's tactics are going to come slightly unstuck.
Possibly.
For a couple of different reasons. At the World Cup, the last World Cup, and at the Euros, me, who, let's be honest, has got no coaching degree in football whatsoever...
I don't know, you saved a penalty from Matt Le Tissier.
I did save a penalty from Matt Le Tissier.
Not coaching, I guess.
One of only 2 goalkeepers to have ever done that.
Mark Crossley.
Mark Crossley and Patrick Christys, absolutely. One of them's now a nobody. The other one's Mark Crossley. And... But I was shouting at my TV screen, going, make a substitution, make a substitution. He was leaving it late.
Is this the Euro final you're talking about?
Yeah, well, every single time pretty much I watch him play. But now we've got a question where it might be too hot, players are knackered because it's mid-season.
I don't think the stadiums are temperate.
They are,
and
but they're all knackered. It's mid-season. Harry Kane, Antonio Conte
shouldn't be knackered.
came out.
They shouldn't be knackered at the middle of November. They really shouldn't be. I mean, that should be the peak. But then we didn't factor in the fact that muscle injuries, soft tissue injuries could prevent you from playing in a World Cup. Now, with the exception of Chilwell and Reece James, England's bill of health is not as bad as some nations. For example, France are missing N'Golo Kante and Paul Pogba because of injury, so that's going to really hamper them. Paul Pogba was a great international player. Yeah,
he is a great international player, that's for sure. As a Manchester United fan, do not wish him well. But the goalkeepers, who do you put in net? I am not the world's greatest fan of Pickford and his tiny T-Rex-like arms.
I really like Pickford. And again, he's somebody who is trusted by Gareth Southgate. He has delivered in tournaments. Even though his form maybe 2 seasons ago wasn't great for Everton, he still stuck by him. It's astonishing to think that prior to the last World Cup, he only had 3 caps for England.
But can I just put a case forward for Ramsdale? So
Ramsdale's good. Yeah, they're pushing him hard. It's nice to have some depth. We haven't had much depth in the goalkeeper situation for the last 25 years or so.
Ramsdale's top of the table, mate.
So, yeah, he's top of the table. Yeah, he's only conceded 11 goals. Yeah, Benjamin White also conceded 11 goals.
I also like the way he mugs the fans off. So, the opposing fans, Ramsdale just doesn't give a toss, does he? He's just swearing at them, shouting at them. I quite like a bit of that, although if he did that in Qatar, he'd get arrested.
He came out well in the Amazon documentary about Arsenal because he was really, really annoyed. Arsenal won the game. I can't remember who it was against, but they conceded a late goal. And obviously, you concede a late goal, you lose out on bonuses. And he really gave it to his defenders in the dressing room, which was quite surprising.
Well, yeah.
Because he's relatively inexperienced to be playing for a top 6 club.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, but listen, he'll be pushing, don't get me wrong. Pickford is secure in that position now because he's delivered in 2 previous tournaments for Southgate. He did everything asked of him in Euro 2020, the delayed Euro 2020. Don't forget he saved the penalties as well against Colombia in the World Cup in 2018.
Yes, indeed. Good stuff. OK, all right, Aidan, thank you very much. I'll be seeing you tomorrow night, won't I? Friday Night Feast?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yes, indeed. 7 till 9. Aidan McGee will be joining me for Friday Night Feast. Right, moving away from that now, because coming up is the UK too reliant on foreign workers. The boss of the retailer Next is urging the government to let more foreign workers into the UK to ease labour shortages. I will debate, is it an economic necessity to improve our immigration policy post-Brexit? Basically, do we need more or less legal migrants? Do Brits need to get off their backside and stop filling these jobs? I'll be back in a moment.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales
and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something good happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky. That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back, everybody. The boss of retailer Next is urging the government to let more foreign workers into the UK to ease labour shortages. So Lord Wolfson, who was a prominent advocate of Brexit, said this was not the Brexit he voted for, and the UK's current immigration policy is crippling economic growth. OK. He said that firms should pay a tax to employ foreign workers to encourage them to recruit from the UK first. Joining me now is Lincolnshire arable farmer Andrew Ward, MBE, no less, MBE, and apprentice winner and CEO of Trade Mastermind, Joseph Valente. Thank you very much, both of you. Right, OK, so first things first, Joseph, I'll start with you. Why not? Do we need to just empower more Brits to get off their backsides and go and fill these jobs? Why do we have to keep importing people from abroad?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just looking at some statistics, and there's 1.2 million unemployed in the UK right now. So those people are fit to work, I'd say, in most cases, and they're probably receiving some form of benefit. So we need to incentivise those to go and work and do the jobs that the UK needs. And if they're not willing to do those jobs, then I don't think they should be receiving their benefits. I think it needs to be as part of that deal, as part of that agreement.
OK, we'll throw it back over to you now, Andrew Ward, MBE, who is a Lincolnshire arable farmer. Maybe a slightly different line of work up there. You feel as though we need to import more foreign workers, do you?
Well, the problem we've got is, I mean, I'm an arable farmer from the middle of Lincolnshire, but Lincolnshire itself produces around 27% of the UK vegetables. So we're in a very, very productive area here. And we have got a lot of vegetables and a lot of fruit has been rotting in the fields over the last few months because there hasn't been enough workers to pick them. And the NFU did a survey a few weeks ago, and they found out that there's around £22 million worth of fruit and veg was actually wasted and left in the fields due to a shortage of workers.
But is it, sorry, just quickly on that, just quickly, is it the fact that British workers won't work for the amount of money that you're offering them?
No, it's not only that. I mean, there was in 2020, there was a Pick for Britain campaign launched and huge publicity over that. And a lot of British workers signed up and came to give it a go. But some of them only lasted half an hour because the work is really, really tough. It's very hard work. But also we need to recognise here that the pay that is available in the fields here is really good. And that is why in the past we've had foreign workers come here, because they come over to this country, they get very good money, the families stay abroad back in their homes, and then they send the money back home.
Well, that's a problem, to be fair.
They can earn far more money here than they can back home.
Yeah, but that is also a problem, though, isn't it? Because as we're seeing now in a slightly different context with the illegal immigration that's taking place in the Channel, that money is not staying here, and a lot of it is just going in cash back to Albania, etc. Lovely 5-bedroom house in Tirana or wherever it is, and absolutely nothing to the taxman over here. But, Joseph, I'll throw it back to you. Do you subscribe to that line of view, then, which I don't want to put words in your mouth on the other side of that debate there, but essentially that foreign workers will work harder?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, my previous company, Improgas, it was a national plumbing and heating business, and Eastern European workers were incredible. They'd do the jobs that people didn't want to do. They would put in more hours. They were committed to their families and earning the money. They were very, very reliable. So I completely understand why, sorry, I forgot your name, but the gentleman on the right
Andrew.
to me wants... So say that again? Andrew, sorry, Andrew. I completely understand why Andrew wants foreign workers to come and work on the fields. English people don't want to do the job. It's a horrible job.
Okay.
Why would you want to do that job? But I also see people getting free money that are on the dole. So if they're getting money, they should be made to go and work in the fields.
Yeah, Joseph, I'll stay with you before I go back to Andrew, because we need to come up with a solution for this. You don't win the apprentice and you don't, become a CEO of a company without having a bit of get up and go about you, without problem solving. You're probably the kind of guy that says, bring me solutions, not problems, right? And that's why you are where you are. So solve this for us. I wonder whether or not we've just become a bit too soft in this country. We've had it a bit too good for too long, and we don't have that drive, like, dare I say it, maybe a lot of Eastern European people or people from the subcontinent might have, to really go out and earn that living to support their family. How do we change that? Because once we've gone soft, it's hard to harden up again, isn't it?
I mean, it's very straightforward to me. We've got 1.2 million unemployed people, and if they're receiving benefits, there's got to be a caveat that they need to do some farm work. When I went to Australia and lived there when I was 21, if you wanted to stay the second year, you had to do a mandatory 3 months of farm work to get the second year's visa. So if we put in a mandatory term against term on benefits, and I think it fixes the problem. Hang
on a second. I think we might be about to kill two birds with one stone here, because earlier on in the show I was talking about the fact that the Home Secretary is considering putting some of these people coming across the Channel on cruise ships and not just hotels. There's two questions there. Is at the moment they can't work, so they are just draining the taxpayer in a sense in that regard. And where do we put them? Well, actually, hang on a minute. I think Andrew Ward MBE, Lincolnshire arable farmer, what do farms have? Loads of space. What do they also have? Loads of crops that need picking. Do we put Channel migrants on your farm? Oh, we'll say that.
Yes, well, I think that would be a good thing to do. Yeah, that would be a good thing to do, because the problem we've got, there's a double problem here. If we don't get the workers and we get the food rotting in the fields, it means we have to import even more food than we already are doing. And we're already talking about our food security is dropping at alarming rate. In the UK, we produce high-quality food, animal welfare standards at the best you can get. And so because we're not picking the food and because we're not allowing foreign workers to come into this country, it means we're having to import more food, which is causing another big problem.
So I think we might have cracked it, lads, to be honest with you. So basically, make sure that people who are receiving benefits are either obviously, got a genuine reason for that disability or something along those lines. If not, they should maybe be made to fill in some of the jobs in our farming area. And also, it's a way about being able to house asylum seekers and potentially get something out of them as well. Chaps, I think that's fantastic. We have absolutely nailed it. Well done. That was easy, wasn't it? Why isn't the Home Secretary listening to that? That was Lincolnshire arable farmer Andrew Ward MBE, and apprentice winner and CEO of Trade Mastermind, Joseph Valente. Great stuff, both of you. You can both come back on. We can set the world to rise again. Now, tummy tucks and liposuction are among more than a dozen procedures which will lose NHS funding in a crackdown. The other one's circumcision, by the way, but they obviously didn't want to put that in there. NHS bosses say ending state funding of non-essential ops will help improve efficiency, there you go, easy for me to say, and could save £2 billion a year. The decision comes as the NHS faces a winter crisis. Oh, great. It's always a winter crisis. Every single winter, it gets below 5 degrees. The NHS is in crisis. Anyway, bosses, shock horror, are calling for billions more in cash to keep services running. They're also potentially going on strike. Rishi Sunak has already ruled out cutting its budget as part of the public spending squeeze. Right, to shed some light on this topic, I am joined now by presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller. Steve, thank you very much. I was looking at this. Look, we've just solved the farming crisis and the asylum seeker crisis in the segment before. So we've nailed that. We've knocked that out of the park. Now, let's do the NHS. Because I was thinking, Steve, if people weren't as fat, then it would save the NHS a lot of money. Is that true?
Well, of course it would. And what you've been talking about is what I call vanity surgery. I mean, I would love my eyelids done because I'm getting on a little bit. But and it affects my mental health. But to expect the taxpayer to pay for that is absolutely ludicrous. It's vanity surgery. Listen to some of the costs here, right? Average lipo suction is around £7,000. And then you've got the average tummy tuck of £4,000. Why should the taxpayer be paying that? And you're absolutely right. We expect these things because we've become greedy. And that's one of the reasons that we're too fat, is because we've become greedy. We're gluttonous, and we need a kick up the backside that actually says, come on, start taking responsibility and get on with it, sort yourself out, rather than expecting everybody else to do it for us.
Look,
yes,
just before...
support people, not a problem,
Yeah.
but do not expect, especially in this climate, right, for other people to be paying for a vanity procedure called a tummy tuck or lipo.
Yes, indeed. Now, just before I start getting the flurry of emails in, as I usually do when I talk about stuff like this, gbviews@gbnews.uk, yes, I am aware that I'm not the skinniest person in the world. However, as of 3 months ago, I was 2 stone heavier than this. So what are you doing with your lives, people, hey? Right, no, OK, right. But, Steve, do we need to stop saying that fat is beautiful? Now, I am not saying that personally, but you do look now, what would you say?
Oh,
the
come on,
XXXL model side of things. Is that bad for public health?
Listen, coming back to you, I think I did say to you, you're too gorgeous to be fat. And I think that's what did it. You had a realization. Yes, obesity is a choice, and people don't like me saying that very much. And actually, you know, if you're fat, there is always something you can do about it. The problem we have now is we have this culture of victimhood where we think everyone else should do it for us, and we've normalized obesity. It's now kind of cool to go on the fat walk rather than the catwalk, as I say. And we really need to move on from that, because we're now heading into dangerous times. We've got the NHS that frankly isn't fit for purpose. Now we've got nurses going on strike. People's health is in jeopardy. And the serious message here is be warned, because obesity kills. It triggers cancer, it triggers heart disease, it triggers type 2 diabetes. We're in for a serious wake-up call. I can see that coming.
Well,
so the answer is, to the nation, listen, to the nation, realise you're too gorgeous to be fat, realise you've got to take responsibility, get on with it, stop moaning about fat shaming. If you're fat, you're on death row.
Yeah, look, I'm inclined to agree with you. By the way, it's perfectly obvious to everyone that I'm not exactly the picture of health. I smoke like a chimney and, you know, used to enjoy a tipple as well. And so, yeah, I get all of this stuff, right? I get all of this. It's not easy being, you know, the picture of health. It's not easy. I don't exercise anywhere near as much as I should, if at all, to be honest with you. So I don't want to seem like I'm judging anyone. But do you think sometimes a little bit of tough love is needed? If we are supposedly all in this together, Steve, and we're facing a cost of living crisis, we've got an NHS crisis, we know there's a waiting list backlog. When people talk about doing your bit and maybe doing the Blitz spirit, could people get together and go on a national health kick to try and take the pressure off the NHS?
Well, of course they could. Of course they could. But I tell you what, a lot of people would say, if you were to raise that, they'd say, oh, you're just fat-shaming the nation. And they'd be saying, you've got to love your curves. No, you haven't. You don't love your curves. I mean, this is all euphemisms. When people say love your curves, what they're actually saying is, if you're happy and you're fat, clap your hands. And actually, that's got to stop. Seriously, it's got to stop. So, yes, we do need to be more direct. We do need to support people. It's not about being horrible. It's not about being cruel. Now is the time for a serious wake-up call. And we've got to stop all of this political correctness claptrap mixed in with a bit of wokery on top.
Oh, grief. I tell you what, it sounds like a side order. Slap it next to a burger and chips, you'll be bang on trend. Steve Miller, thank you very, very much, my good man. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Make sure you check Steve Miller out online as well. Lots of very useful advice there. He was the presenter of Fat Families. Can I just say, by the way, I couldn't help but notice, I don't know if anyone else thought this, that the obligatory video footage of fat people playing in the background. We're doing you'd be gutted, wouldn't you, if you're watching the telly now and you see that and we don't have to sign a consent form for it. You're sitting at home going, oh, there he is, talking about, it's your Auntie Sandra. It's your Auntie Sandra. Also, I'm pretty sure one of them wasn't really wearing anything. We'll have to vet some of those pictures. But that fish and chips one we did look good. Anyway, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on striking workers. Bring it back, bring it back. How much does a soldier get paid? This is from Duncan. How much does a soldier get paid compared to a nurse? Maybe our armed forces should strike as well. They are greedy. It's an odd flex, that Duncan, to be fairly honest with you. I'll leave that one there. Dan says, I'm assuming the civil servants will be striking from their homes as they haven't been to the office in months. I don't think we'll notice a difference if they're on strike or not. Yeah, I mean, look, to be fair, this is the main point about the civil servants, isn't it, really, which is that as far as Jacob Rees-Mogg was saying, they were never in the office anyway. You know why I reckon they're striking now? Because of the cost of living crisis. Yeah, they're saying, no, we can't afford it. It's because they're working from home, so their heating bills have gone up, their electricity bills have gone up, all this stuff. They become too entitled, another knock-on effect of lockdown. Peter says, Patrick, you should spend a 13-hour shift doing one-to-one nursing, looking after seriously poorly people, not even having time for a break. It really is a very challenging job, which deserves a higher salary. Peter, I would like to clear it up. I am not saying for a single second that I don't think nurses deserve any pay rise at all. I am not saying that if we were to smash down society and start it again, and people were paid based on the contribution of what their job did to society, i.e. how many lives you save or something like that, well, our economy would be arguably flipped, wouldn't it? But we don't live in that world, Peter. We don't. And right now, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, if nurses have had a 1,400 quid pay rise the year before, or this year, sorry, 3% pay rise the year before that, and now they want a 17.6% pay rise. I'm not saying they shouldn't get a pay rise at all. I'm just saying that is mental. That's too much money. Maybe give them a little bit less or quite a lot less. And I also do think, I can't get around this, Peter, I'm sorry, I do think this. I think if your job is to keep people alive and you go on strike and people die, I'm sorry, I can't get behind that. I just cannot. But anyway, right, thank you very much. A range of views. You are with me, Patrick Christys on GB News. In the next hour, yes, banging on about it. Strikes, strikes, strikes. When will the revolution just be over and done with, people? Conservative MP James Daly reports on the fact that migrants now could be housed on cruise ships. Yes, P&O migrants, Club 18 to 30, it writes itself. And former football manager and king of the jungle, Harry Redknapp is here on England's chances in Qatar as Gareth Southgate announces his three-lion squad. I'm also obviously going to talk to him about little Matty Hancock in the jungle. I didn't think it was possible to swallow my entire fist, but I did last night just watching Matt Hancock singing. Don't go anywhere. Before that, though, is your weather.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update. Tomorrow will be fairly similar to today. Again, very, very mild, quite blustery. Most places dry but cloudy. Why is the weather so mild at the moment? Well, track the isobars all the way down to the southwest. That is where our air is coming from, bringing warmth but also bringing a lot of cloud. And particularly close to this weather front, a lot of rain. We actually have a Met Office yellow warning in place. Persistent heavy rain, especially for Skye, other parts of the Highlands, though that rain really building up through the next 24 hours or so could cause some problems. The rain at times affecting maybe central Scotland, perhaps for a time for Northern Ireland. Drizzle at times for western parts of England and Wales, but many places away from the northwest dry. But look at these overnight temperatures, incredibly mild, above the average maximum for this time of year. It will be windy and particularly gusty for a time on Friday across southeast Scotland, so we have another Met Office yellow warning here. Still some drizzle at times around Western Hills. The rain pushing back towards Northern Ireland and southwest Scotland during Friday afternoon, perhaps easing in the far northwest. Again, elsewhere, most places dry and again exceptionally mild, 17, 18 Celsius. Could see a little bit more in the way of brightness across East Anglia and the southeast through Friday afternoon. That rain continues to slip south as we head through Friday night and into Saturday, but kind of grinds to a halt across the far north of England before heading back north during Saturday. Again, it's going to be a very mild start to Saturday. Again, most places cloudy. The wind's a little lighter on Saturday. That could make for some foggy conditions in places. Could be quite a murky old day on Saturday. If that mist and fog doesn't clear, well, temperatures may only be in the mid-teens, but with a bit of brightness, say North Wales, we could get up to the high teens in places. As for Sunday, well, again, most places dry, could be quite misty and murky, and again, very, very mild. Bye for now.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, the briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
It's 5 o'clock, it's the business end of this show. I'm Patrick Christys and this is GB News. It's been a busy show so far. We've got plenty more to come in this final hour. The backlash has begun against the nursing strike. So it's estimated the 17.6% pay rise nurses are demanding could cost the taxpayer a whopping 10 billion, big ones. And now, on top of this, 100,000 civil servants are joining bus and train drivers, and yet more strikes. No one would notice. They're never in the office anyway. The only reason they're striking, as far as I'm concerned, is because they know that their gas and electricity bill and their heating bill is going through the roof because they're all working from home. Can a country already on its knees afford to give in to these militant unions? Anyway, a cost-cutting idea reportedly in from the Home Office. Get a load of this, people. First you had your wave machines in the channel, now cruise ships. Cruise ships offshore could be used to process these asylum claims. Is this the solution to cutting the £6 million daily figure that we're spending putting illegal migrants in hotels? As I said earlier on, maybe this is the solution, because after day 6 of the buffet and that tribute act to who knows what, they'll be back in Calais before you know it, won't they? And on the day that Gareth Southgate named his squad for the Qatar World Cup, we are speaking to a genuine football legend this hour. That's right. It's the man himself. It's Harry Redknapp. If England finally have the squad to end what is it now? Is it 56 years of hurt, is it? Oh, good grief. Anyway, and of course, I'll be talking to him about the jungle. He was in the jungle himself, wasn't he? Little Matty Hancock made the nation's toes curl last night. Not in the same way, of course, he did with Gina. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Before that, it's the latest news.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story on GB News, just over 7 million people in England are now waiting to start routine hospital treatment. That's a new record high. The latest data released by NHS England shows that over 400,000 patients have been waiting more than a year for healthcare. A&E waiting times have also reached their highest levels since 2010. And 1 in 5 patients who've had surgery cancelled had to wait longer than 28 days for a new appointment. That, as the Health Secretary says, he's had a constructive meeting with the Royal College of Nursing. The union's been urging the government to take action over pay or face industrial action in healthcare settings across the country. Steve Barclay says they've agreed to meet again soon to avoid walkouts. The government says the union's asking for a 17.6% pay boost. And train drivers across the country are set to strike on the 26th of November. Members of ASLEF, 12 train companies, are involved in a long-running dispute over pay. They're among several rail unions on strike this month, including the RMT and Unite. Meanwhile, a tube strike's causing disruption across London today, with limited services on the Underground, the rail and tube passengers all urged to check before they travel. Problems are expected, we understand, to continue into tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, 100,000 civil servants have voted in favour of a national strike over pay, pensions and jobs. The Public and Commercial Services Union says the move means industrial action will take place across a range of services. Workers affected include driving test examiners, Border Force officials and job centre staff. Now, Downing Street says the Prime Minister has spoken to Ukraine's president, reiterating the UK's unwavering support for the country. Rishi Sunak this morning reassured President Zelensky the UK would continue to provide military aid, including more than 25,000 extreme weather kits for troops. It follows Russia's withdrawal yesterday from the strategic southern city of Kherson. And Rishi Sunak's been holding talks with leaders of the devolved nations, as well as the Irish Premier for the first time since he became Prime Minister. Mr Sunak's at the British-Irish Council Summit in Blackpool today, where he's meeting his Irish counterpart Michael Martin and First Ministers Nicola Sturgeon and Mark Drakeford. He's expected to urge UK nations to work together and build a future defined not by division, but by unity. The absence of a power-sharing executive, though, means Northern Ireland isn't represented. Peter Kyle, Shadow Secretary for Northern Ireland, says change is needed.
There's got to be a change of attitude. There's got to be more emphasis on Northern Ireland, and the interests of Northern Ireland have got to be put first, not as it has been for years now, neglected and used as a tool to beat a political tool to beat the EU with or other issues.
Now, in other news today, a man from Somerset has been sentenced to life in prison for murdering his partner, who died 21 years after he set her on fire. 58-year-old Stephen Craig left Jacqueline Kirk severely disfigured after the attack in Weston-super-Mare back in 1998. Craig had already served 15 years in prison but was arrested again last year after Jacqueline died from her injuries in 2019. His sentence carries a minimum of 15 years. The Queen Consort has commemorated victims of the nation's wars at a special ceremony at Westminster Abbey. Camilla laid a cross in the field of remembrance in memory of those who died in past conflicts. More than 1,000 veterans gathered in the grounds of the Abbey too to join dignitaries in observing a 2-minute silence. Now, as you've been hearing from Patrick, England manager Gareth Southgate has named his 26-man squad for the World Cup in Qatar, which kicks off in just over a week's time. The FA made the announcement on the England Twitter feed. Leicester midfielder James Maddison has been included in the squad, as have Manchester United's Marcus Rashford, Newcastle's Callum Wilson and Man City's Kyle Walker, despite his recent injury problems. Speaking at a news conference earlier, Southgate said having a bigger squad has its benefits.
So having 26 available meant that we were probably able to take a couple of risks that you might not have been able to with 23. But we think the balance is there, and we've got cover in the positions we need. We're lighter on depth in some positions than other in our country, but we think we've got everything covered.
Gareth Southgate. You're with GB News. More news as it happens now. Back to Patrick.
Well, now, almost every day, unions are announcing their workers will go on strike. Today, it's civil servants, not that you'll notice, because they're all work from home doing absolutely nothing but undermine the government anyway. And train drivers, although, again, hard to tell, isn't it? Because if it's anything like the trains that I take, they're almost never there. Less than 24 hours ago, it was nurses. More significant, to be fair. Moments ago, it's been announced, get this, that teachers in Scotland will strike over pay on November the 24th. Good news for kids, though, who don't want to be taught about whether or not they were born into the wrong body. This afternoon, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, says that he held a constructive meeting with the Nurses Union following their decision to vote for strike action for the first time in their history. The strike is likely to affect the majority of NHS employers in the UK as nurses take action against pay levels and patient safety concerns. The pay rise, understood to be demanded by nurses, has been described as remarkably high by a Cabinet Minister. That's because it is, by the way, 17.6%. Now, we did a lot on nurses yesterday, and I would just like to re-emphasise my position on this, because I am dead against the idea that someone whose job it is to keep people alive, or help keep them alive, anyway, could just walk out on that job, because I don't think it's right, I don't think it's fair, I think it's against all kind of moral issues. However, I am not dead against any kind of nurses' pay rise. I just think 17.6% right now is a lot, and it would set the precedent. It's impossible, because look at all these strikes taking place. So do we give everyone a 17.6% pay rise? The civil servants, the Scottish teachers, the railway drivers, etc.? No, you can't do that. Anyway, apparently this is going to completely disrupt our health service. Yes, the nurses' strike. So how much are they asking for, and can the government afford it? Spoiler alert, I've just told you, around 17.6%. To discuss nurses' real terms pay cuts, what they are asking for and the potential impact these strikes are having, I'm joined by the independent statistician, which you could definitely not say if you'd had a drink, and the former head of health analysis at the ONS, Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, thank you very much. Right, so how bad have nurses had their pay cut in real terms? So their pay has officially gone up, but in real terms it's gone down. How bad is it? Is it worth this?
Yeah, it's probably worth explaining to most people what real terms mean. So basically everybody gets a pay increase. If you get, say, a 3% pay rise, but inflation's 3%, then in theory you've had no pay rise at all. So when we say a pay cut, it's generally decided to go down cuts to public services. Now, yeah, go on.
Just explain this to me. So let's say that when the autumn budget comes out, it's tax hikes galore, and even people say on the top rate of tax, for example, might end up paying 50p in the pound as opposed to 45, I think it is, at the moment. So all of those people, i.e. everyone, apart from people maybe in the public services, are going to face a real terms pay cut in order to pay for a pay rise for people in the public sector. Is that right?
Well, in theory, if you raise taxes, that is kind of a pay cut, because obviously your wages that your employer gives you, if you pay more tax on that, you've got to look about what goes in your bank account. So in theory, yeah, tax rises is a pay cut for people as well. So I think that is an important distinction to make. Now, the 17.6% or 17.2, whichever, roughly around there, that they're talking about, it's way out of the realms of reality in terms of what we've got. The way the NHS bill kind of goes in terms of wages, about 46% of the total NHS money that we have is spent on wages. Now, for the whole of the health service in terms of the wages, if you were to give everybody a 17% pay rise, I think that estimate is about £10 billion that you've talked about. Now, that's everything. That's not just nurses, but obviously if you cave in and give 17% to nurses, the doctors are going to be knocking the door the next day asking for the same amount. So I think the government are probably going to try and play a long game on some of this, Patrick, because inflation naturally will start coming down next year, because what inflation is looking at the change in prices year on year. Now, we're not going to see the same rise in energy costs. We're not going to see the same rise in fuel costs, the petrol pumps. Food should start kind of not coming down, but not growing as much as it has this year. So inflation will start coming down next year, just naturally. But I think the more important thing is, Patrick, we've been seeing, today, record numbers of waits in terms of the NHS waiting times and waiting lists.
Shocking.
We've got 5,000 people. Yeah, and we've got 5,000 people now waiting for heart kind of operations and looking at kind of heart procedures. Now, what we're seeing, Patrick, the last 25 weeks, higher than expected deaths, and heart issues is a key factor in that. Now, the nurses are saying themselves they won't stop emergency treatment. That's fine, but some of these people who are perhaps not going to drop dead tomorrow, but if they don't get a heart treatment, they might drop dead next week.
No, of course, and
Those
people
are the people who are going to be
not getting chemotherapy today. I mean, that's if Just Stop Oil don't stop them on the motorway on the way to the hospital, for goodness sake. But all of this stuff, all of these knock-on effects, it's certainly not going to help with the massive backlog. And then you know what we're going to hear here, Jamie, as well, in another year's time, when a potential nurses' strike, I mean, I was reading just before I came on air, it might even last 6 months. I think that's a bit fanciful, but let's just say it does. Well, then next year we're going to be hearing about, now there's 10 million people on NHS waiting list. Our hands are tied, we're too overworked, we need another pay rise. Some people might be forgiven for saying, is this just some kind of, rabid trot lefty agenda to try and bring down a government? Is this what it is?
Well, I'm not sure. I think for me, what we've really got here, Patrick, is if you want to save some money, I think the government needs to reform how they employ people in the NHS, because I know of stories of people who've left their NHS nurses job to go and work for an agency, to go back to the same job in the NHS technically, but working for an agency on far more money. Now, that's one thing that they need to look at in terms of saving some money. A lot of people are saying that they want these big pay rises because their working conditions, they're overworked. Now, if you give a 17% pay rise to nurses, there's going to be a lot less money to employ more nurses. So that's going to have a kind of a bad effect in terms of sorting that problem out as well. So I think, people need to get around the table and sort this out. What some employers are doing, Patrick, mainly in the private sector, is because obviously people are struggling. And remember, the government are giving cost of living payments. So nurses, doctors, obviously everybody across the country are getting payment towards energy bills. So in theory, that's kind of like a bit of a pay rise themselves by supporting households. But what they can do, which is what some private sector companies are doing, is perhaps give a one-off payment for the winter that's not baked into your salary year after year after year, which is what the government would be worried about. That might be a solution in some of this.
Yeah, and Jamie, it does strike me as the moral side of it. I cannot get my head around this moral side of it. If people go on strike and people die or suffer as a result, I think that's pretty catastrophic, really. But just talk to me a little bit about this idea that people come on. I had quite a rabid trade unionist who was on before. He was saying to me, "Oh, what? They all just want it privatised. It's deliberate. This is deliberate. Okay, and they're hurtling towards a system where they can go, this is totally broken. Let's privatise the thing." Now, fine. If I was a nurse working in the NHS now, paid an average salary of between 32 and 35 grand, say, a year, and then we privatise the system, am I likely to end up earning more money?
Well, it would depend, I suppose, in terms of how the kind of the NHS or what replaces it would be run. Because I think we do know that many years ago, that before kind of the pandemic, some people were coming from Europe over to this country because wages were relatively pretty good for nurses.
Yeah, this is the thing. Sorry, I've got to cut you off because I've got to keep it moving, Jamie. But thank you very much. But I think you make a good point. Look, given everything that's going to happen, it's not going to be the last time we'll talk about this issue. Jamie Jenkins there. I think a nice level-headed voice, an independent statistician and former head of health analysis at the ONS. Statistician, I think the hardest word I find to say. Anyway, strong words from the Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, who has called on the government to give some certainty to asylum seekers, believe it or not, by speeding up approvals instead of housing them in hotels, arguing temporary accommodation is, quote, grim. You should see some of the hotels I've stayed in. Anyway, Prime Minister's questions yesterday, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said that he and the Home Secretary Suella Braverman are working day and night to end the unacceptable rise in channel crossings as he continued to face questions over her appointment. One solution being mooted today, get ready for this, strap yourselves in, people. You've had your wave machines. You've had towing boats back. You've had people who were completely wrong because they wanted to put dangerous things in the channel. No. Now it's cruise ships, OK? It's disused cruise ships that could be used to house migrants. It might cut costs, they're saying. Cruises are currently being used to house Ukrainian refugees in Scotland, but should they be re-established to tackle the illegal channel crossings? Joining me now is the MP for Bury North, James Daly. James, thank you very much. I mean, this
Patrick,
surely...
how are you?
I'm all right, how are you?
I'm all right. Always better for seeing you, Patrick.
Good stuff. Have you ever been on a cruise?
Never, and I don't want to go on one either. Oh. My idea of holy hell is that, Patrick. I have to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, mine is as well, because you always end up hearing these stories about norovirus going round or something, and then you're trapped on it. I'll never forget in the initial days of COVID, those poor people on the cruise just off the coast of Japan. Anyway, on that note, do you think that cruise ships are a good idea for people coming over the channel?
No.
Right, why not?
Well, it's not the source of the problem, Patrick. I could go through the statistics. We all know about this. But we have to find a way of processing applications extremely quickly and deporting the people who shouldn't be here. It's as simple as that. At this moment in time, until very recently, decision makers in the Home Office were making one decision per week. I mean, by any standards of productivity, that's quite astounding. You know, we heard in the Home Affairs Select Committee, we want to get to four decisions per week by decision makers. They're the people who put together, take a statement, make a few phone calls in respect to putting a case together. They should be doing that by Monday morning. We should be, we've got a backlog into the, over 100,000, Patrick. We need to get real about this. We need to do There's no reason why these applications can't be sorted out quickly, and we should be following the lead of Germany, Sweden, other European countries, and enforcing agreements that are in place with Albania and sending people back who shouldn't be here. Simple as that.
One of the big arguments for the cruise ship, so people who are pro-cruise ship, is that it means that these people never actually technically set foot in the UK, which means that various detention camps like Manston, etc., but also hotels, especially in smaller rural communities, that town or village might only have a population of a few hundred. You plonk another few hundred people there, asylum seekers, it does change the area, it does. And maybe it makes it easier for people to potentially abscond, potential safety fears. So that's the pro-cruise ship argument, that it keeps people offshore over there. Can you see that side of things?
I think it's nonsense. I think it just ignores the problem and where the problem is. We could come up with all sorts of things, but the numbers that are coming over, Patrick. So 10,000 adult Albanian males between the age of 18 and 40. Nearly 2% of the adult male population of Albania have come this year, and the numbers are going up and up and up. Unless we've got a special order for a lot of cruise ships, even the people who are propagating that idea, it's utter nonsense. What we need to be doing is making sure these decisions are done quick and people are deported. It's as simple as that. We're not doing that at this moment in time. It's not a difficult thing. There's lots of examples, Patrick, that we can show. One of the great ironies of this, I keep getting told by colleagues, on the left of politics, that we should be taking more sort of notice of what our European cousins are doing in terms of all their great social reforms. Well, let's follow Germany. They've had an agreement with Albania regarding returns since 2002.
Yeah, they have. I mean, the EU itself has apparently got bases. Well, I know they've got bases in Turkey because I've been to them. They're right on the Syrian and the Iraqi border. And apparently they've got deals with Libya as well. So, I mean, the idea that we would not be able to do something anyway along the lines of a Rwanda scheme, I know you're not massively in favour of that, but, these kind of stuff is a bit questionable.
Can I make one other point, Patrick? For the Albanian males that are coming across the channel, undoubtedly most of them will claim modern slavery and the modern slavery provision.
Absolutely. Or that they're gay or whatever. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, under modern slavery provision, the average time it's taking for the Home Office to deal with those claims is 450 days. What are we saying? We're going to have people on cruise ships for 450 days? It's nonsense.
Well, it's a lot of cabaret acts you'd have to sit through, isn't it, to be fair? And that buffet would probably wear itself out after a while. But look, seriously, because people do want something to do. My question is, until we get a change in the law, though, it's going to be difficult because either Home Office or Border Security or immigration staff, whoever they are who are actually processing these people, either they are not working hard enough or they're too short-staffed or both, which is why these applications are taking too long, or it is currently too difficult to decide whether or not someone's here illegally, because there clearly must be loads of loopholes to run through. So we need to simplify the law then, don't we, to fast-track it, because at the moment they must be jumping through all sorts of hoops, which is why it's taking so long. Or are they just a bit lazy, the people who decide these things?
I'm a lawyer, Patrick, as you know, and I wasn't one for wanting to change the ECHR for changing modern slavery provisions, but we are getting, as a country, we are being taken advantage of. So I'm confident that this Home Secretary and this Prime Minister will bring forward legislation which will make it far easier to make these decisions quicker and to get people out. In this country, Patrick, I can't describe a better word for them, there is a left-wing blob which stretches politics into the press, the BBC, into all sorts of other people who are very important, influential sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? That people who have an impact upon the messages that are coming out to the population. And they are trying to paint out that anybody who takes a position like we're talking about here is some rabid racist.
Yeah.
I asked them to look at the Home Affairs Select Committee with Commander Dan O'Mahony. Not me or you, Patrick. Dan said to the Home Affairs Select Committee, what's driving the Albanian migration in particular is the strength of organised criminal Albanian gangs in the north of France, and they are transferring that activity to our country. We're effectively watching one of the biggest transfer of criminal behaviour that we've ever seen. How is that?
No, we are. and the lunacy of it as well, I'm going to have to let you go in a second, James, but the utter lunacy of it is apparently, I speak to lawyers pretty much every day on this issue, they say, well, one of the things they can say is they've fallen foul of a particular gang in Albania and they are seeking asylum from that and their family will be threatened. But then people also come over saying they're seeking asylum from the other gang. So we're actually almost importing a foreign Albanian gang war in a sense as well, in some senses. But James, look, I've got to let you get going, I'm afraid. I've got to keep it moving, my good man. But James Daly there, MP for Bury North. Tory, of course. There we go. What do you make of all of that, ladies and gentlemen? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Also joining me, I believe, is UK immigration lawyer Harjat Bangar. Harjat, thank you very much. Right, you've just heard Tory MP James Daly there discussing his issue on that. He doesn't think cruise ships are the answer. I had a lawyer on earlier, Ivan Sampson, who thought cruise ships were the answer. I suppose you now have the deciding vote on this. Are cruise ships the answer?
I have to agree with the MP, or as my learned friend, as they call him in Parliament. I don't think they're the answer. I think the answer is, how about we just nab the gangs? It's a sensible one. But surely if you want to stop people from dealing in trafficking in people, you catch the people traffickers. Just like if we want to stop drug dealing, we catch the drug dealers, right? So it's not that hard to work out. The gangs operate from the same place for the last 20 years. We know where they are.
But in order to do that, would we have to start a war in order to do that? Because I've said this before, you know, let's just send in the SAS. And then when I say it, a lot of people pipe up, I know, right, I'm with you on this, send in the SAS. But there's got to be a reason why we're not doing it. And from what I've heard... Well, from what I've heard, though, these shock horror, the people who front up the migrant gangs, the people smuggling gangs, are actually quite clever. And if they turn their hands to a different line of business, they'd probably be not quite as rich, but they'd be successful in the city or something. So they plonk themselves in places where they're almost ungettable, like they're in, you know, mountains in Pakistan somewhere, or they're in... So in order to go and take the SAS in there and do it, we'd risk starting a war.
You'd have to cut the head off the snake, but at the moment, we can't even cut the tail off. We don't even know where the tail is. So, you know, we're absolutely nowhere near. They're forced to... Look at the brazenness and the boldness of these gangs. They've been doing it for 20 years from the same place, sending people to the same ports, to the Kent coastline from Calais. They know they're not going to get caught. That's how much of a Mickey take they are.
They
and that's
are
how
taking the Mickey.
ineffective our people are.
But just to bring it back to today's stuff, right? In the short term, before we've sent the SAS in and started World War III and cut the head off the snake, cruise ships, right? Cruise ships, because we're running out of hotels. OK, we are running out of hotels. Taxpayers' money for the hotels. I know it's going to cost us for the cruise ships as well, but actually, it might make the people of Britain feel a little bit more palatable about the migrant crisis because, frankly, they wouldn't be living in a hotel next door to them.
Well, they're only living in hotels because there's no other alternative accommodation, and the hotels industry was decimated by COVID. Now, look at detention centres. They're on our shore. We can't even deal with them properly, the conditions. On a cruise ship, you are going to get all sorts of stuff happening, right? So it's not controllable for us to do that. So the idea is, as the MP said earlier, why don't we just knock the cases out quicker and send these people back? In 2011, 12, 13, we were sending back roughly, including voluntary returns, about 50,000 people a year. We were sending back. That has come through down to now only a few thousand. And at one stage in the past couple of years, it was only about 800. Now,
I'm just wondering at what point. Look, we've had wave machines. That's not going to work. We've had some people who wanted to put nasty things in the channel. That's obviously not going to work.
Yeah, sharks.
Did you hear that? But anyway, we won't dwell on that. And the cruise ship thing's not going to work. What is the solution? Maybe if you come here, right, we'll build you a 4-bedroom house in Albania if you agree to go back. Maybe that's where we're going to end up. Maybe that's where we're going to. Anyway, Harjat, I've got to let you get going, I'm afraid. But always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Harjat Bangal, UK immigration lawyer. Coming up, will the Three Lions roar in Qatar as Gareth Southgate announces his final England squad for the World Cup? We also know the Welsh squad. All right. After the break, I'll be speaking to one of the greatest managers England never had. He's also king of the jungle, isn't he? So he ticks 2 boxes here because we get to stick it to little Matty Hancock, who... he just honestly makes me want to swallow my own fist listening to him in the jungle. But also the World Cup stuff. Don't go anywhere.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Good evening. The headlines at 5:30 on GB News with me, Polly Middlehurst. Our top story, just over 7 million people in England are now waiting to start routine hospital treatment. That's a new record high. The latest data released by NHS England shows that over 400,000 patients have been waiting for more than a year for treatment. A&E waiting times have also reached their highest level since 2010. And 1 in 5 patients who've had surgery cancelled had to wait longer than 28 days for a new appointment. Train drivers across the UK are set to go out on strike on the 26th of November. Members of the ASLEF union are involved in a long-running dispute over pay. They're among several rail unions on strike this month, including the RMT and Unite. Meanwhile, a tube strike in London is causing disruption today with limited services on the Underground. And 100,000 civil servants have voted for a national strike over pay, pensions and jobs. The Public and Commercial Services Union says the move means industrial action will take place across a range of public services. Workers affected include Border Force officials and job centre staff. And in yet more strike action, teachers in Scotland have announced their first strike date after voting overwhelmingly for industrial action. Members of the EIS union working in schools across the country will walk out on the 24th of November. It comes 3 months after they rejected an offer of a 5% pay increase. Further dates will be decided tomorrow. And Downing Street says the Prime Minister has been speaking to Ukraine's president, reiterating the UK's unwavering support for the country. Rishi Sunak this morning reassured President Zelensky that the UK would continue to provide military aid, including more than 25,000 extreme weather kits for troops. It follows the withdrawal of Russian troops from the strategic southern city of Kherson yesterday. Those are your headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. And a quick snapshot of today's markets for you. The pound will buy you $1.1666 and €1.1477. The price of gold is £1,499 and 7 pence an ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed at 7,375 points today.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, England manager Gareth Southgate has named his 26-man squad for the World Cup in Qatar. The FA made the announcement on the England Twitter feed. Let's have a look at the full squad, shall we? Jordan Pickford, Nick Pope and Arsenal's Aaron Ramsdale are the three goalkeepers. Injuries for Chelsea defenders Reece James and Ben Chilwell mean that there's no opportunity for them, but it is an opportunity for Liverpool's Trent Alexander-Arnold and Ben, or as apparently he prefers to be known, Benjamin White of Arsenal. Kyle Walker is included, despite his recent injury problems. It's a similar situation for Manchester City teammate Calvin Phillips, who gets a chance along with Leicester's James Maddison. A surprise call-up for Crystal Palace midfielder Conor Gallagher. Newcastle forward Callum Wilson is preferred. As support for Harry Kane up front, no place, however, for Brentford's informed striker Ivan Toney or Tammy Abraham of Roma. Right, let's speak now to a man who, in my opinion, was the greatest manager that England never had. If we'd have put him in charge of our golden generation, we would not have been waiting this length of time to bring it on home. No, we had to give it to a Swedish chap instead. This is the legend that is Harry Redknapp. Harry, how are you?
Good evening. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, look, pleasure to speak to you. You are more than a bit of an icon for me. But what changes would you have made to this England squad?
Not too many, really. I think Ivan Toney's a bit unlucky not to go. You know, I thought he might have took an extra striker. I like Ward-Prowse as well at Southampton, who didn't get in. But, you know, you can't pick everybody. And it wasn't too many shocks. I was pleased that Maddison got in. I'm a big Maddison fan. I think he's a fantastic player. But it looks, it's a good squad. We took Walker. Hopefully Kyle Walker gets fit and is fit enough to play some part in the tournament, because he's still a top player for me. So no, it's a good squad. So apart from Ivan Toney, I think he was the big one that missed out.
Harry, it feels a bit flat. I can't remember a build-up to a World Cup like this. Now, maybe it's got something to do with the fact that we've lobbed it over to the Middle East and that we're playing in stadiums in a country with an abominable human rights record, and all of the talk has been about that. Maybe it's that we're mid-season at the minute, but it's been flat. It's been dead. How's Gareth Southgate going to get his lads up for this?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, normally we're all keyed up now. The season's finished. We're looking forward to the World Cup. You know, this is really sort of interrupting our season, isn't it, a bit? I'm sure if you ask most football fans, they go, oh, my God, we've got no Premier League for Nick, or no Championship, or no Division 1 or 2, you know. They're probably all going to miss their teams playing more than what they're interested in the World Cup at this particular time. So it is a strange one, a strange place to play. I'll be watching every game as usual, but it does seem very, very unusual.
But I'm also wondering, by the way, I think Gareth Southgate gets a lot of utterly unfounded stick, because we've had under him a semi-final and a final, which, let's be honest, is great, right? It's a shame we didn't win it. We were. If it wasn't for Chiellini trying to decapitate Saka, I mean, he shouldn't have been sent off for that. He should have done time. Right? And instead, we ended up losing on a penalty shootout. I mean, it was an absolute disgrace. I'm going to look into that referee's finances. Only joking. Don't sue me. But, you know, now he's got an opportunity. My only fear is this now an England team on the wane a little bit?
No, I think we've got some great young players, you know. I think Bellingham is amazing, you know, 19 years of age, captain in Borussia Dortmund. I watched Jack Grealish last night. I mean, I just love watching it. What a player, what a talent, Grealish. You know, every time he gets the ball, you just feel something special is going to happen. Foden, we've got so many good young players. We've got Harry Kane, you know, he's one of the best centre-forwards in the world. So I think we've got a really good squad. Defensively, obviously, we've got a few issues. One or two players not in form, a little bit short now. Walker, you know, Reece James being out injured is a big loss for us, I think. But no, I think we've got a squad that certainly will go there and you know, will be every chance. I don't know who's going to win it. It's a very open World Cup this year. You know, Brazil, Argentina. We've got as good a chance as anybody, I think.
OK, right. So this is the thing. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most likely, how likely is it, do you think, that at the end of this World Cup, I'm going to be 15 pints deep, topless in the Trafalgar Square fountain, shouting, "It's come home"?
Well, if you do that anyway, you could do it even if we lose the World Cup, by the sound of it. Yeah, I mean, you don't need to wear World Cup to go topless in the fountain in Trafalgar Square. you could do it anyway. But England winning it, listen, we say it every time, don't we? Yeah, it's coming home. It's, well, I don't know. Why not? Why not? We've got some great talent, great young players. Sacco's amazing at Arsenal. I love watching him play. You know, there's some great talent there. So who knows? It's, you know, the draw is all the luck of the draw. It's a cup competition. You can. I'm not being this, but we had a great draw in the last World Cup. We got to the semi-final without really playing a decent team, and then we could get beat by Croatia. If the draw is in our favour, we can miss Argentina or Brazil or whoever. There's no reason we can't go very, very close again. I think we've got a big chance.
And very finally, I don't know if you've been watching any of it, but I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Little Matty Hancock is heaping more misery on the nation by continuing to exist, as far as I can tell. What tips would you give him in order to become king of the jungle? Because you were epic in there.
Oh, he's got no chance, is he? He'll be doing every trial. They won't vote him out, though, because they want him to stay in and suffer. So he'll stay in very late. He'll be right there till almost the bitter end, I think, because they'll want to make him. They'll want to see him get in there with the rats are crawling all over him and the bugs, and they're making, you know, they'll want him to suffer for a few weeks. They just won't let him off lightly. He won't get his appearance money and get out of there quickly. He's going to have to earn every penny of it.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, Harry, thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to meet you.
Great talking to you.
Hey, Harry Redknapp, the best manager England never had. Anyway, right, OK, moving on. King Charles is ready to have an active... This is very much a shift in tone, by the way, people. King Charles is ready to have active conversations about Britain's involvement in the slave trade, his goddaughter has revealed. It comes after it emerged that the King wants the transatlantic slave trade to be taught in schools and understood as widely as the Holocaust. The subject was also addressed at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda. Look, let's get down to brass tacks on this. Basically, do we have to continue to say sorry for the slave trade? Should we pay reparations for it? And should we continue to teach kids that, frankly, we've had a terrible history and we're all awful racists? Historian David Starkey joins me now to discuss this very, very issue. Do you think we need to have a, quote, serious conversation about the slave trade and teach it all to kids and maybe pay reparations?
We're only, actually, Patrick, we're only 180 years late. The important thing is, Prince Charles here, King, I will keep calling him, King Charles is a little bit late in his own royal history. His great ancestor, Prince Albert, a man on whom Charles modelled himself when he was Prince of Wales, this extraordinary consort of Victoria. In 1840, he led a meeting of the Society for the Abolition of Slavery in Exeter Hall in London. And this is what he said in words that I think King Charles could only aspire to. Slavery was the desolation of Africa and the blackest stain upon civilized Europe. That is in 1840. That's 180 years ago. And you know what? He wasn't just apologizing. Albert wasn't just wringing his hands. He was leading a meeting that was there to do something, to make sure that slavery, having been abolished in Britain, that the slave trade, having been suppressed by Britain, was going to be suppressed throughout the world. And for the next 30-odd years, a very large part of the British Navy was devoted to suppressing slavery, against the resistance, to begin with, of the United States of America, and much more importantly, of countries like Portugal, whose you were talking about, Brazil, the great soccer-playing nation. Brazil is the supreme slave society, and slavery continues there against the wishes of England, against the pressure of the British Navy and the British government until 1867. Why don't we hear about all that? Why don't we teach that?
Well, is this...
Why don't we actually...
Yeah. David, is this just more British bashing that we have to see now? We have to learn about all the negatives of the empire. Every year, once a year, without fail, we have a discussion about whether or not Winston Churchill was a villain or a hero. We have to just sit through that, apparently. Now we've got youngsters who don't think he's good. We've got people at a school in Pimlico burning the Union Jack. This is the future of this country, apparently. And now on top of that, we have to be told that, you know, we need to say sorry to every single person in the world because of our role in the slave trade. What about teaching them about our role in stopping the slave trade?
Well, I would like to do both. I'm a proper historian. Of course you teach the fact that Britain was heavily involved in the slave trade in the 18th century. But what you then go on to do, Patrick, and this is the important thing, you say that in Britain, uniquely, remember, slavery is a universal phenomenon. The British didn't capture the African slaves. Fellow Africans captured them. The British didn't trade Africans in Africa. Arabs did. And there was, of course, another huge slave trade that we never hear anything about that goes to the Islamic world. But the essential point is that in Britain in the 18th century, uniquely, there is a moral revolution of conscience which says slavery is wicked and must be eradicated. We are the only country to do that. Just let me make one other point, Patrick. Another thing that we're being constantly chastised for is industrialization. Oh, we defiled the planet, wasn't it wicked? It's only because of industrialization that you can abolish slavery. Every previous society rested on human effort and human muscle. Thanks to the British, thanks to Newcomen and his steam engine, thanks to James Watt, we invented real power, not windmills, real steam power. That replaces human muscle. That's why you can abolish slavery. And we should be telling that story. We should be telling it with modesty and pride, because, Patrick, you and I didn't do that. When I listened to you talking to Harry, I thought, God, did this man actually play? And then I realised you're much too fat and out of condition to do that.
Oh, similarly, thank you very much, David. It's always a pleasure.
I did not do anything in the 18th century, nor did you. But we need to teach people that double story in which bad becomes good. That's what history's about.
Absolutely, David. Yes, of course. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure. For those that don't know, David Starkey and I spent rather a long time sitting next to each other during our excellent coverage of the Queen's sad passing. So I know him well enough to let him get away with the fact that he's just called me fat. But anyway, David Starkey there, he's going bald. Right, you're watching GB News with me, Patrick Christys. Coming up, as the former Health Secretary was pelted with sludge and insects on his first night, a senior minister has suggested that a large number of politicians are downloading the I'm a Celeb app so they can vote for him performing grim tasks. You'd love to see it. Oh, gosh. Over a week of anticipation is over. Little Matty Hancock has entered the jungle. Last night's episode saw the former Health Secretary covered in bugs and sludge as he took part in his first trial, reducing some of his campmates, easy for me to say, into hysterical laughter and making the former pop legend Boy George cry. But by the way, can I just say, Boy George cannot be taking the moral high ground on anything to do with this. Anyway, I believe we might be going to a break now.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Right, welcome back, everybody. Now, I'm very wary that this time yesterday someone came into the studio with a snake and wrapped it around my neck. If you didn't watch, you can get all of that online. Yes, Snakey Sue was in because we were talking about this issue. So what today? Is it going to be a tarantula? I'm not sure. But after a week of anticipation, little Matty Hancock has entered the jungle. He slipped on the bridge on the way in. It was great to see. And then he got pelted with sludge and, oh, gosh. Anyway, last night's episode saw the former health secretary covered in bugs as he took part in his first trial, reducing some of his campmates into hysterical laughter and making the former pop legend Boy George cry. Also, according to a cabinet minister, hundreds of MPs and peers have downloaded the I'm a Celebrity Get Me Out of Here app so they can vote for Matt Hancock to face Bush Tucker trials. I cannot wait to see MPs' expenses forms. You know when we had the MPs' expenses scandal and everyone was like, oh my gosh, you've got a duck pond or something like that, wasn't it? Someone paid for a new kitchen. I don't think many people would care if MPs are whacking their phone bill on expenses if they keep calling the I'm a Celebrity lot to keep little Matty Hancock in there. Anyway, to shed some light on last night's episode and what we can expect tonight as well, by the way, I am joined by entertainment correspondent and writer. It's Rebecca Twomey. Rebecca, thank you very, very much. Oh, gosh. Look, do you think little Matty Hancock realises how unpopular he is, or is he just going to be a non-stop cringe fest?
Do you know what? I'm not sure he realises how hated he is. It's like he's not really receptive to how the public or his fellow campmates really respond to him. And what's really interesting, he's been teamed up with fellow supervillain Sean Walsh, who sort of fell out of favour with the public over kissing a married woman on Strictly when he was on it. So it's almost like the two of them have become thick as thieves as well, which I don't think is going to help Matt. And also, in the very first episode, the two of, Matt Hancock's first episode, the two of him and Sean Walsh teamed up to collect the stars, the meals for camp, and they only got a possible 6 out of a possible 11. And Matt then said, let's lie to the rest of them and say, we only had 6 to get. So already he's set off on a really wrong note. That's not really how it worked on I'm a Celebrity.
One of the things that aside from, his singing thing was great when Sean Walsh was asking him about Ed Sheeran. Matt Hancock just hit peak Alan Partridge, where he's like, I like Ed, I'm from Sussex. And he started singing, and he goes, don't get me singing, I'm terrible. Carries on singing. He just said, good grief. He's like the guy at a house party with a guitar that's belting out Wonderwall, and you're trying to make him eat it. But go on, carry on.
No, I was going to say, what's so brilliant is that we've got him there and we can all torture him with all these terrible trials. So while we're all furious with him and hate him, we can actually all vote and see him be punished, on TV, which is amazing.
Yeah. What will it take, do you think, for little Matty Hancock to achieve redemption? How much kangaroo scrotum will it take?
There's not enough kangaroo scrotum in the world to sort of endear that man to any of us. But what he could do, and what some people have managed to do, is that if he really shows that he's a team player, really shows this vulnerable side of him, stops being so arrogant and so full of himself, and actually shows some humility, maybe even does a massive apology for his behaviour.
That's not going to happen. He'd have to have a conscience for that, wouldn't he? He'd have to have a conscience. It's definitely not going to happen. No, if anything, he'll double down, like we're all double jabbed or whatever. But, I think, I'll tell you what, I think the other campmates have got the measure of him there. Can I just say something that might be a little bit controversial here? I really don't like Charlene. The one who's...
Why not? She's brilliant.
Why does everyone like her?
She was on Let's Bring Back to Task.
Yeah, no, but not because she's really bossy. She's in the kitchen all the time. Well, not the kitchen, the campsite. The food comes down, boom, she's straight on. Everyone's like, just back off, Charlene, all right? Also, can I also add this? Look, Boy George. Now, we don't need to rake up too much of the past. Boy George, I like the guy. I like someone who's got character. I like his music. Don't think he's got any right to take the moral high ground over Matt Hancock, though, has he?
No, he hasn't. Firstly, with Charlene, I think she's just a brilliantly strong, feisty woman, and you can only applaud her for taking Matt Hancock to task and saying, why are you actually in here? She really did, ask the questions we all wanted to ask, so full respect to her. When it comes to Boy George, look, he did serve time in prison for what happened. He has been sober ever since. So I think he's gone on a very different path to redemption. He's allowed to express emotion and say, if he had lost his mum, pandemic, he wouldn't have been able to be in the same space as Matt Hancock. So I think really rightly so, they're sort of reflecting how the rest of us feel.
No, I do get that. I think we are in danger, though, and I never thought I'd do. I don't want to come across like I'm sticking up for Matt Hancock, right? I don't like the guy, and that's pretty straightforward.
No, don't do that.
But he didn't invent the coronavirus. At the same, we have to be careful, not us, but I think just the public generally, right? Look, I didn't agree with his handling of it. I don't think he's a particularly nice guy. He's a fabulously awkward chap, and obviously did the dirty and all of this stuff, and broke the rules that he helped about. Yeah, all of that stuff. At the same time, I do think people have to be careful not to fall down the rabbit hole of the idea that this bloke created the coronavirus and then tried to give it to everyone. Right, there is definitely a distinction there. But Rebecca, thank you very much. I'll have to get you back on very, very shortly because I don't think he's going to be out of the jungle anytime soon, is he? Rebecca Twomey there, entertainment correspondent and writer, just discussing about little Matty Hancock getting down and dirty in the jungle as opposed to doing it in his own office. Up next is Jubes & Co. with Michelle Dewberry, who's right here in the studio. What have you got coming up, Michelle? No snakes today?
No, there's no snakes today. What a treat that was, though. Yesterday I went to bed dreaming of large snakes, so I did. Coming up on my show, have you seen the Brexit boss? I think he was mentioning it earlier on, actually. He's saying we don't have the Brexit that we want. He wants more overseas people to be able to come in and work. So I want to get into that. What do the viewers at home think to that one? And private school, let's be honest, Patrick, right? If most people could afford it, they would, I think anyway, send their kids to private school, right? But, you know, there's all this conversation about all of the top jobs and the top echelons of society being dominated by private school pupils, which, by the way, you would understand. But is that tide turning now? It feels like it is to me. It almost feels like it's a disadvantage now to send your kid to private school. And get this right, I can't end my show without talking about this lunacy, Patrick.
Go on.
Over in Staffordshire Police, they have jailed a 72-year-old man, right, for breaching COVID lockdown rules. I think it's absolutely absurd. I think they've got better things to be doing. So I'm pondering tonight, should there be an amnesty on COVID lockdown breaches?
Yeah, I think so. Where was he from again? What was the area?
It was around Stoke. It was Staffordshire Police.
Free the Staffordshire one. That's what I say. This guy, I mean, it's just nuts. I mean, like you said, they've not got anything else on. I mean, it's not like we've got knife crime and Just Stop Oil everywhere and all of this stuff, isn't it? Counter-terrorism, grooming gangs, for goodness sake. Oh, no, we better lock up this old codger. I suppose it's probably one person they could actually catch. Anyway, Michelle, thank you very much. Michelle Dewberry there, who will be on your screens very, very shortly for another wonderful hour of Box Office TV with Jubes & Co. That's all from me. Thank you very, very much. Everybody who's been getting in touch, who's been emailing in. I will be back tomorrow. What day is it? Friday. Yes, there we go. Friday Night Feast tomorrow. I'll be doing 7 until 9 p.m. It's going to be a good one. First, though, it's your weather. Take it easy, people.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. Tomorrow will be fairly similar to today. A lot of cloud, gusty winds and exceptionally mild. It will still be very wet across northwest Scotland as well, where this weather front has never really shifted. Follow the isobars. They come all the way up from the far southwest, bringing with them very mild air, but also quite a lot of cloud, and particularly close to this weather front, persistent and heavy rains. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. There could be some further issues, maybe 100 millimetres of rain or more over the hills in this part of the world, potentially causing some flooding. A bit of drizzle elsewhere around the hills of Wales and northwest England, but many places dry. Look at these overnight temperatures, many areas staying in the teens, potentially record-breaking in some locations. Gusty winds through the night and in the morning across southeast Scotland. So we have another Met Office yellow warning in place here, particularly lively gusts, which could be dangerous for high-sided vehicles. The rain through the course of tomorrow pushes a bit further south into Scotland and across more eastern parts of Northern Ireland. Again, for most of England and Wales, it's dry. A lot of cloud, but some breaks in the cloud. A bit of sunshine. Could see temperatures up as high as 18 Celsius, so incredibly mild for the time of year. That rain will edge perhaps into northwest England, maybe northwest Wales for a time on Friday evening, before then starting to move back further north as we go into Saturday. So maybe a dull, damp start for southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, but that rain will clear away to the north on Saturday. England and Wales could be quite murky, a lot of mist and low cloud around into this weekend. But if that clears and we see a bit of sunshine, well, the winds will be lighter and temperatures could be higher still, perhaps 19 degrees, say, in North Wales, and even where it's cloudy and murky, we'll still see temperatures in the mid-teens. So the mild theme continues. Sunday's a similar day. Again, could be quite misty and murky. Most places, though, will be dry, and if it brightens up, it really will feel mild with lighter winds.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get